He ruled over empires, crushed gods and demons alike, and commanded armies of the undead. The name Kang Jun once made every world tremble, but after 3 centuries away from Earth, he's back. Not as a ruler, just a tired man holding a baby in his arms. Once known as the Emperor of Anox, Kang Jun now struggles with bills, diapers, and a sister who thinks he's delusional. Yet, behind his calm smile hides the same power that shattered realms. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he dreams of his throne, of the countless souls that once knelt before him. Other times, he wakes in terror, fearing the blood on his hands will stain this peaceful life too. But peace never lasts long when fate remembers your name. When a mysterious gate opens in his city, fate pulls him back into the chaos he thought he'd left behind. To pay off debts, he takes a job as a porter, but his strength soon catches the attention of hunters and monsters alike. And when the gate transforms into a hidden dungeon, filled with undead and a summoning altar, the Emperor of the Dead shows the modern world what true power looks like. He was once feared across dimensions. Now Earth is about to remember his name. The Emperor returned, and this world isn't ready. The story kicks off with an old guy sitting at a desk, scribbling away with his pen. His name is, and he's no small deal. He's the big boss, the chancellor of the empire. But even with all that power, sees himself as just a loyal servant. He doesn't care about ruling over everyone or being called the king of vampires. For him, just working for his master is what matters most. A strange book floats in the air, its pages open above a glowing magic circle. Stands nearby, determined to write down everything about his master's crazy achievements, wanting to make sure nobody ever forgets what happened. The story kicks off with something huge happening. Out of nowhere, the sky lights up with this massive blast of purple lightning. It's the kind of scene that makes everyone stop whatever they're doing and just stare. Out of nowhere, a man showed up from another world. He didn't come alone. There was chaos all around him, and a massive dragon was there too, making everything way more intense. The army started moving into the continent of Arx. After the invasion, things just weren't the same. The streets felt tense, and everyone seemed to be looking over their shoulders. Even the usual noise around town had died down, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for whatever might happen next. People tried to go on with their day, but it was clear the invasion had changed everything. Huge crowds showed up, all hyped and cheering for the emperor. Everyone was out there celebrating because he'd just won, and you could tell the whole place was pumped about it. Chancellor walks up to the emperor looking excited and proud. He starts telling the emperor that with this win, they've basically got control over every dimension. But the emperor just sits there, sounding tired and empty, repeating what's said, like it doesn't really matter to him. The emperor kept talking, his back now facing the chancellor as he shared what was on his mind. He pointed out how, in the end, nobody really knew anything about his homeland. Watched him, clearly worried, trying to figure out what was going on with him. Jumps back into the story, letting everyone know that this guy is his master. Since the day his master showed up, it only took him 50 years to take over the whole continent. Goes on talking about just how powerful his master really is. This guy isn't someone you mess with. He can control millions of the dead just by thinking about it. He's so good with a sword that people say he could cut through mountains or slice across the sea. Everyone knew the master as the emperor of the empire, someone who didn't really fit into any category. He came from a completely different world, and somehow nothing could kill him. The king of the dead and ruler over the living always found that his own name fit him best, no matter what people called him. Everywhere he went, crowds bowed down, unable to do anything against his insane power. Anyone dumb enough to pick a fight with him didn't last long. They ended up as undead, stuck serving him forever whether they liked it or not. Nobody could stand up to this guy. He took down dragons that scared the whole continent, beat the Demon King, crushed the 7 top bosses from the demon world, and even brought down the heavenly demon and the leader of the martial arts world alliance. Even the king of spirits, the one who watches over the world tree, was there. Naturally, every world linked to the continent of ended up under his control. Can't help but question how someone as ordinary as him is supposed to figure out what his master really wants. What he truly wanted was simple. He just wanted to go back home to Earth. That was all that was on his mind. After searching through every dimension and still not finding a way home, the emperor decided it was time to call in his top warriors, every god of war who served him. Sitting up on his throne, he looked out at everyone gathered around. He seemed worn out, almost like he'd hit his limit. He let everyone know he was done for now, that he needed a serious break and was about to take a long rest. His followers couldn't believe what just happened. Some of them started thinking about what this decision would mean for everyone. One of them, who looked pretty much like a walking skeleton, made it clear that no matter what, they were still loyal and would keep looking for a way to help him come back. The emperor just shook his head, wondering why he should even bother going back after all this time. It had been almost 300 100 years since he left his homeland, and to him, that place probably didn't even feel like home anymore. He thought about his family and friends back home. He missed them a lot, but he figured they must have gotten older, maybe even gotten sick, and probably passed away by now. The emperor realized there wasn't anything he could do. It was just too late. His followers watched him with sad eyes. Seeing their faces, he made up his mind and told everyone to stop what they were doing. From now on, he wanted everyone to put all their effort into finding a way for him to finally rest for good. The followers looked upset and restless, clearly not happy with what the king decided. Some of them frowned, others clenched their fists, and a few even looked ready to argue. It was obvious they didn't agree with the king's choice, and nobody tried to hide it. All day long, the sound of crying echoed through the imperial palace. No matter how much it hurt to hear, nobody dared go against the emperor's command. In the end, the older guys in the palace set up a disintegration magic circle. It was meant to wipe out anything that got close. The emperor stared at the magic circle, thinking that he could finally see everyone. With that in mind, his master started walking toward the circle by himself. Didn't want to let him go alone, so he followed, trying to get his attention. Right then, showed up, sprinting over and shouting for his master. He didn't slow down, chasing after him straight toward the magic circle. Even with everything going on, made it clear he was ready to stick by his master no matter what, even if it meant risking his life. The emperor moved forward, his foot landing right in the middle of the glowing magic circle on the floor. Everything just felt over, figured everything was fine, but then out of nowhere, a bright light burst into the room. Someone's voice cut through the silence, wondering why it was so dark. Jun, who was actually the emperor but now in a new body, showed up holding a baby girl he didn't look too happy with, who had just woken up somewhere he didn't recognize. Was still trying to figure out what was going on when Jun started calling him out for always being stingy, especially about not keeping the lights on at home. Jun made it clear that from now on, the lights better stay on when he was around. Stood there in his sports gear, holding his head like he had a headache. He tried to explain himself, basically saying that even in the worst times, a little bit of hope can stand out more than anything else. Jun shot him a look that could freeze anyone in their tracks, clearly not impressed by the guts this guy had to talk back. Deep down, he couldn't believe Crimson had the nerve to even open his mouth. He had this unspoken rule. If someone had to start off all polite just to say something risky, maybe they should just keep quiet instead. Across from him, Crimson felt the heat and awkwardness rise, suddenly super aware of how he sounded. He tried to play it cool and cleared his throat, wishing he could just disappear for a second. It was late, way past bedtime, and noticed his master was still up. June sat in his room, surrounded by toys that looked like they belonged to a much younger kid. When brought it up, June just stared back, kind of confused, unsure if was being serious or messing with him. Jun looked tired, rubbing his eyes as he tried to explain that he hadn't been able to get any sleep since the baby wouldn't settle down. Bowed his head really low, trying to apologize as much as he could. Jun just told him to keep it down, not wanting any loud voices that might set the baby off again. He was already on edge, hoping nothing else would wake the little one. Sure enough, the baby's soul shifted, and soon the loud sound of crying filled the air. Jun was clearly annoyed as he reminded Crimson that he was the one who woke her up, so it was on him to handle the situation now. Crimson, sticking to her usual polite way, suggested that maybe the girl was just hungry. Jun, a bit frustrated, pointed out that he'd already given her some baby food not long ago. Throws out the idea that maybe it's time to check her diaper just like before. Jun, though, lets her know she's totally fine. There's nothing to worry about. At last, just came clean. He kept saying as politely as he could that he honestly had no clue why she was crying. As usual, Jun didn't hold back and called him useless. Sat at his desk, jotting things down in his notebook. While he's busy writing, his phone suddenly goes off with an urgent call, catching him off guard. Jun lets everyone know that a late-night snack just showed up, courtesy of his sister. As soon as hears the word snack, his eyes light up and he looks genuinely excited. Jun mentions that it's chicken, and right away, bolts out of the room, yelling about chicken. He doesn't even bother to close his book, just leaves it open as he runs off. The story picks up with talking about what happened after the magic circle didn't work. Since things didn't go as planned, his master ended up going back to the homeland he'd missed for so long. He writes down that, in this spot, there was something around that his master could never have seen coming. He'd never been married or even had a girlfriend before, so this was all totally new for him. On the table, there was a red hair tie, the kind the princess always wore, making it pretty clear who had been there. Now in the present, Jun and little Saul are all gathered around the table, ready to dig into some chicken. The smell fills the room and everyone's focus is on the food. Especially seems pretty happy. There's just something about chicken that hits the spot every time. Jun's sister showed up and called out to the old man. She told him he should eat plenty, looking out for him the way older sisters sometimes do. Decides to help out by holding Saul and feeding her. He figures this way, he'll actually get to eat without any hassle. As he's doing this, she asks if he skipped going out again today. She can tell he's still pretty out of it. King June sat at his table, eating like it was just another day at home. He didn't look bothered at all, and everything about him showed he was totally at ease. Nothing seemed to throw him off, not even for for a second, watches him closely, noticing how lost he seems. It's obvious to that the guy isn't sure what's going on, and he can't help but feel worried for him. After everything that happened, Jun tries to act like he's totally okay, but steps in, not letting him brush it off. She just looks relieved that he made it back in one piece, not caring if he tries to pretend otherwise. Brings up how he went missing back when that first gate showed up. She can't help but wonder how long it's been since then. He got stuck inside that gate for years, and he's only just come back home. It makes sense that he wouldn't bounce back right away. Jun, holding Saul, once again tells her that he wasn't stuck inside some gate. Instead, out of nowhere, he got pulled into this strange place called the continent of. Rolls his eyes, thinking to himself if this guy is about to go off again about how he used to be some super powerful emperor from another continent. Jun nodded, making it clear he wasn't lying. Lee Jun's info popped up. He used to be the emperor of Survived the Gate, and right now, he didn't have a job. Kept up her sarcastic attitude, turning to and pointing at him, kind of like she was calling him out in front of everyone. She wanted to know who this old guy was. Didn't waste any time. He stepped forward and introduced himself, letting everyone know exactly who he was. Jun tells everyone that is his assistant and another person who made it out of the gate. Right now, doesn't have a job, but back in the day, he always helped Jun with his work and talked with him about important stuff going on in the country. Also handled most of the paperwork and office tasks for Jun, staying loyal and making sure everything ran smoothly. Lee King-jun's older sister worked long hours at the factory. When she heard about what happened, she answered calmly, showing she got where he was coming from. Let out a sigh and explained that most people who made it out of the gates ended up with serious problems. A lot of them couldn't talk anymore or just shut down completely, all because of the stuff they went through. She lets out a breath, glad to see that Jun and the old man don't seem too bad off. They just look like they're a bit confused. Jun looks a little irritated. He doesn't really like being called crazy, even by his sister. Tries to calm things down, reminding him it's been 3 years since he came back. She pats him on the shoulder, trying to show it's fine if things feel weird right now. He just needs some time to get used to everything again. Kept pushing him to stay positive. She reminded him he still had plenty of life ahead and should just focus on getting better. She changed her words, calling it adjustment instead of treatment, and promised she'd handle things for now, doing her best to keep everything under control until he was back on his feet. June stayed quiet, just watching what was happening. Looked over at the old man and let Crimson know he was welcome to stay with them until he was able to find his family. Crimson was honestly grateful, and you could see how much it meant to him. Jun glanced over at Sol, wondering what was going on. While he watched, his baby daughter, Lee Sol, who was just a little kid and obviously not working yet, made a small noise. Sol came over with her bib, which was still untied. June noticed and quietly offered to tie it for her. He held onto the strings of the bib, remembering how, back in the day, he used to make the knots himself, the same kind they used when dealing with people who committed serious crimes against the country. Sol glances up, his eyes wide and honest. He tries to say the same words back, but he's struggling, stumbling a little as he gives it a shot. Jun gets serious for a second and tells her to pay attention. He picks up a chicken neck and starts showing her how to use the bib's strings, making sure she can see every step. He points out that when the knot is tied this tight, the neck snaps right away. Before he can finish, shows up out of nowhere and yells his name, catching everyone off guard. Freezes for a second, trying to process what just happened. She can't believe Jun is talking to the baby like that. Meanwhile, Jun stays cool and says he's just teaching Saul like a dad should. Gets annoyed and tells him to cut it out, wipes Saul's face, and from now on, no more scary stories for the baby. Jun grumbles under his breath, thinking how tough this is turning out to be. Jun carefully wipes Saul's face, trying to help her feel a little better. Notices how Sol seems to relax whenever her dad is around, almost like she really enjoys being close to him. Jun cradled the sleepy baby in his arms. She was starting to close her eyes, so he decided it was time to take her to her room. He carefully puts her down on the bed, his thoughts drifting to his own daughter, the one he missed seeing born because he wasn't there. Jun thinks back to a memory. He sees holding a baby, introducing her as Lee Sol. Explains that Saul's mom passed away when the baby was born, and Jun wasn't around at the time. She also asks if he remembers anything about what happened. Jun thought back and remembered that what happened was from 300 years ago. Began to say 300 again, but paused. She let him know she got the point, then looked at him and reminded him that no matter what, she was still his daughter. She wanted him to remember to treat her right. Back in the present, Jun sits quietly beside the sleeping Sol. He crosses his arms, thinking things over. Honestly, he figures things could be way worse. Jun's mind drifted back to an old memory from his past life. He remembered standing in a field as the sun was going down. Had asked him what he'd want to do if he ever got to go back home. Jun didn't answer right away. Instead, he just thought about the question, turning it over in his head. The Emperor took a moment to think, then admitted to himself that he just wanted a simple, quiet life. He wished he could go about his days days without anyone paying attention to him, just blending in and not standing out at all. Right now, Jun gently pulls a blanket over his daughter Sol, making sure she's comfortable and warm. He finishes thinking about it and realizes that raising his kid and just living day by day is probably one of those regular things people do. Jun stood up and noticed some papers lying on the desk next to him. He grabs the stack of papers and sees a bunch of bills. Some are just regular payments, but one of them is a late notice. The next afternoon, Jun showed up in a fresh shirt, holding a spoon in his hand. He looked serious, like something was up, and it was clear from his face that things weren't going as planned. Jun sits at the table, carefully feeding Sol with a spoon. In the background, watches them, staying quiet but alert. When Jun mentions that something's wrong, his mind immediately starts racing, trying to figure out what could be going on. He can't help but worry as he waits to find out more. Jun checks to make sure everything's clear, then looks over at Sol to see if he likes the food. Sol nods, looking happy. Meanwhile, just sits there, kind of stunned, his mind racing. He can't believe the legendary master actually said the word problem just now. Jun looked over at, wanting him to read out the documents, grabs the stack of papers and starts looking through them. The first one is a notice about unpaid phone bills, saying there's a debt to pay off. Jun wants to know what's next, so checks the following letter. This time, it's about their water getting cut off because the bills haven't been paid on time. Jun, still curious, asks him to keep going. Kept looking over the notice about the electricity getting cut off, then moved on to another warning about the gas being shut off because the bill hadn't been paid. Jun saw what was doing and told him to stop, figuring they'd heard enough bad news for one day. Meanwhile, Jun didn't let it bother him too much, just kept feeding Sol like it was any other day. Looked over at Jun, feeling a little awkward for bringing it up. He pointed at the stack of papers and wondered if they were all about late payments. Jun nodded, realizing had a point. He remembered that his sister never brought it up, but now it was obvious. Their finances were totally out of order. Couldn't figure out who would actually ask someone from the royal family for money. He started thinking out loud, coming up with a plan. Maybe they could bump up taxes for a while and make the nobles and local lords pay more, just to cover things for now. Jun tries to hold back his laughter, but he can't help it and just starts cracking up at the whole idea of progressive taxes. He covers his head, laughing even harder while just stands there, totally freaked out and confused, trying to figure out what's gotten into his master. Jun just grins, looking like he's up to something, and lets the guy know he's way off. He points out that, compared to the way things are sorted on, their status back on Earth would be pretty low, somewhere around what would count as slaves, or just regular folks with not much power. Jun kept talking, using his finger to show what he meant. He explained that everyone had to put up with tough work and serve others, all for a small amount of money from those in charge. That little bit of cash was just enough to get by. Looks like he just saw something totally unexpected. His eyes are wide, and he stands frozen, not sure what to do next. He remembers that he's got royal vampire blood, and used to be a vampire lord. He became Archduke after doing a ton of good stuff for the king. In this world, he's treated like he doesn't matter, just another person forced to do whatever he's told. Stumbles a bit trying to pull himself together. He knows he needs to chill out, even though everything feels out of control. Deep down, he believes that if he's really loyal, he has to stick it out and show it, especially when things get tough. Drops to one knee in front of Jun, promising to help him build a new empire and get back on the throne. Jun just stands there, barely reacting, acting like he really doesn't care what does. Jun stood there, towering over Sol. He looked serious as he explained why they had to make some money. Later on, Jun tried to get Sol to eat some baby food. He held out the spoon, hoping she'd go along with it, but Sol just turned away and wouldn't open her mouth. Showed up keeping an eye on them while they tried to feed the baby. He mentioned the baby food was made with black sesame seeds just for this moment, but it was pretty clear Sol wasn't into it at all. Jun thinks back to some advice he once heard. If a kid doesn't want to eat, it's better not to push them. Instead, it helps to turn the whole thing into a game and make it more fun, so the kid actually wants to try. King Jun says they're going to play a game, and right away, Sol and pay attention. Both of them are curious, waiting to see what kind of game he has in mind. Jun let her know it was basically a contest to see who could finish their food better. He picked up his spoon, his eyes lighting up with excitement. He made it clear that if she came out on top, she'd get to call the shots for the rest of the day. Then he looked at her, waiting to see if she was in. Sol's eyes go wide and you can tell she's pumped. She doesn't even hesitate. She's all in for the challenge, practically bursting with energy. Grinned and tried to cheer her on, nudging Sol to dig in and take on her dad. Sol's eyes lit up, clearly pumped for what was coming. Jun watched all this with a sly grin, thinking to himself that she just wasn't quick enough. Jun looks back on his past, remembering how he got dropped right into the chaos of. He knows the only reason he managed to climb to the top and become so strong was because of everything he went through there. He always gave it his all, even when he was just out there chasing one rabbit. He digs into his food like he hasn't eaten in days, barely looking up. He makes it clear that she's way too slow to ever stand a chance against him. Sol's eyes go wide, and he just freezes for a second. It's like his brain needs needs a moment to catch up with what just happened. She hears her dad's challenge, and tears start to well up in her eyes. The baby suddenly starts crying and hurries over to pick her up. He looks right at June, clearly upset, wanting to know what happened to make the baby cry. Jun quickly tried to explain himself, saying he never meant to upset her, but wasn't having it. He pointed out that, from the way things looked, anyone would thought Jun was actually trying to make her cry. Jun watched his daughter cry, his face calm. He told her that if she thought something wasn't right, she needed to toughen up. Stood nearby, not saying a word, just watching the moment unfold. Sol starts crying harder and lets out a tired sigh as she does her best to help Sol settle down. While all this was going on, sat down to jot something in his record book. He wrote about how the emperor had challenged the princess to a food duel earlier that morning. Even though the princess was barely 3 years old, the emperor gave it his all and somehow managed to win against her. Keeps writing, his eyes drifting to the window now and then. As he wraps up his journal entry, there's this quiet sense that he's a bit uneasy about what he might do next. Later on, Jun shows up with Sol in his arms and looks over at his sister. He asks if he can head out today. Who's busy cleaning up, pauses and stares at him, clearly not expecting him to want to go anywhere. Was a bit uneasy. It was her day off, so she figured she could keep an eye on Sol. The thought of him heading out by himself didn't sit right with her. She just wanted to make sure he'd be okay on his own. Steps in, laughing a little as he tries to calm down. He tells not to stress about it and promises to stick with him the whole time, making sure he knows he's not going alone. Couldn't help but look at him, surprised that he wanted to come along too. Jun and sat together on the bus as it rolled down the street. Jun stared out the window, his mind drifting back to the talk he'd had with about money. The words kept replaying in his head, making him think about what he needed to do next. Meanwhile, the city moved past outside, but Jun was stuck in his own thoughts. He remembers telling him she's totally broke. She explained how their neighborhood isn't safe, which is why rent's low, but now she's burning through her security deposit just to get by. Jun thought back to when he asked her how much money she needed. She just brushed it off, telling him to focus on his own stuff and not stress about her problems. Trying to lighten the mood, she joked with a quiet laugh about hoping to win big from the lottery tickets she picked up that week, like maybe $1 billion would fix everything. Kept thinking about how, if she pulled this off, they could finally leave for somewhere safer. She'd be able to look after Saul, at least until he landed a steady job. Glanced at the saw curled up by her leg, still sleeping. She thought about knowing she was at that stage where she really needed care and attention from the people around her. On the bus ride, Jun sat there, thinking about what just happened. To him, it seemed like the kind of thing you could fix if you just had enough cash. He let know he'd been turning it over in his head. He lets him know that if he wants his money plans to work out without any problems, he's going to need a fresh name and a whole new identity. Isn't sure if the guy means his name. Jun nods, pretty sure about his decision. He looks at the guy and says he's got a new name for him, one that fits better with where they are now. Gulped, his mind racing with excitement at the idea that the emperor might actually give him a new name. Then Jun stepped forward and let everyone know that was anymore. Froze, hearing the name said out loud. He couldn't help but feel thrown off. It hadn't been that long since he showed up in this world, so things like this still caught him off guard. Jun caught the look on his face and could tell something was off. He wondered if wasn't into his new name, but when shook his head, Jun still didn't look convinced and wanted to know what was really going on. Jun tells the story behind the name, saying it's a title that only goes to the most loyal people in their group. He breaks it down, means rock, means steel, so together it shows that loyalty is as tough and unbreakable as both of those things. This isn't just any name. It's a sign that is someone they can always count on. Jun mentions he might change the name if it doesn't suit him, but before he can say much more, jumps in, super eager, making it clear that he'd never just decide on his own whether the emperor's chosen name was good enough. For that kind of decision just isn't his to make. Jun nods, clearly glad that the name is a hit. In his head, he can't help but think this name is way better than, which was the first thing that popped into his mind earlier. They pull up to a busy bus station in the city. Jun nudges, letting him know it's time to get off. Steps out, checking out the area with a confused look. He's thankful for Jun's help, but he's still not sure what's supposed to happen next, glancing around for some kind of clue. Jun lets them know they're heading straight for a gate. His eyes light up. His mind races with the idea that the gate is probably packed with all sorts of monsters. He can't help but laugh a little, feeling pumped up inside. Deep down, he knows this is the right call. Jun noticed, also known as acting pretty fired up. Curious, he wondered what had gotten into him, though didn't just give a regular answer. He started going off about life in this deep, thoughtful way, making it clear there was more to his excitement than what was on the surface. Even the best swords lose their edge if they just sit around unused. He couldn't help but think about how pumped he felt just imagining getting back into action. It had been ages since he'd been on a real battlefield, where things got intense and every second counted. The idea of jumping back into that chaos, where everything was on the line, actually got his heart racing. As they walked, Jun mentioned that things might get a bit tough. Jun told everyone they were just going to help carry stuff, not do anything else. Didn't really get what was going on and looked a bit lost. They learned that if anyone wanted to hunt inside the gate, they'd have to get a registration card, and that card cost 1,000,001 for each person. Dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the street. He just couldn't take being stuck as a porter anymore. Looking up at his master, he asked if he could work by himself for a while, hoping that might help out with the family's money problems. People started to crowd around, curious about what was going on. Jun noticed all the attention and told his friend to calm down, not wanting to be the center of everyone's stares. Stayed put, stubborn as ever. Even with everyone waiting, he wouldn't budge. He looked like he'd rather face anything than work as a porter, no matter how much pressure he got. A shadow fell over Jun's face as he leaned in, his expression turning serious. He looked down at the guy, first speaking in a low voice, trying to see if he was really going to stay down. The mood changed fast. Jun's next question came out sharp, sounding almost like a threat, asking if the guy was looking to get himself hurt. Started to freak out, thinking his master was mad at him. The warning stuck in his mind, and he couldn't help but remember what happened to the heavenly demon. That story didn't end well and didn't want to end up the same way. He scrambled to his feet, looking embarrassed as he tried to make things right. He stood in front of his master, hoping he wouldn't get in more trouble. Jun rested his hand on his friend's shoulder, understanding where his friend was coming from. He could tell that the guy was just being loyal. Jun tried to calm him down, mentioning that he'd heard porters earn around 300,000 won a day. He pointed out that if they just worked for a few days, they could pay off the registration fees and bills. After that, they wouldn't have to stick with the job. As they were chatting, a guy they didn't recognize started walking over to them. A guy showed up, dressed in hunting gear with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked at them and wanted to know if they were the ones there for the porter job at the D-rank gate that day. Around the entrance to the glowing purple gate, guards stood watch while people walked by, keeping their distance but throwing curious looks at the strange scene. Some paused for a second, as if deciding whether to get closer or just keep moving. The whole area had an uneasy vibe, with everyone seeming more alert than usual. Noticed something weird. People just walked past the place like it was totally normal, even though it was wide open. No one seemed to care or even look twice. The guy said his name was. He was a C-rank hunter and seemed pretty chill as he brought them over to meet the rest of the group. Everyone looked curious, checking out the newcomers as made the introductions. A big, bald hunter named Lee looked at the old man and the skinny kid, clearly not impressed that they were joining as porters. His face showed how annoyed he was, like he couldn't believe these two were actually part of the team. Even though he was way older than the others, stood up and let everyone know he could still handle the job. He started to tell everyone about himself, but before he could really get going, Lee cut him off and started making fun of him. Didn't bother hiding how tough the porter's job was. He made it clear, almost like he was annoyed, that even really strong guys struggled with the work. To him, the idea of an old man and a skinny kid trying to handle it just didn't make sense. Leaned in close to his master, thinking about whether he should take out their enemies now. But Jun shook his head, letting know it wasn't the right moment yet. He told him they just had to work as porters for a few days. That way, they could get enough cash to pay for their Awakener ID cards. Finally caught on to what his master was trying to do. He was honestly impressed, thinking about how close he came to messing things up if he hadn't paid attention. Jun stepped forward, looking around at the group. He wanted to know who was in charge, so he waited for someone to show themselves. Let them know he was the one in charge of the squad. Jun noticed wasn't sure about hiring them and guessed it was because they didn't look trustworthy. Admitted that was true. Then Lee stepped in, making it clear that they were tough and wouldn't be a problem. Stood there unsure of his next move. He kept glancing around, his mind racing with possibilities. He didn't want to mess things up, but he couldn't just stand by and do nothing either. He thought about his family stuck in the hospital and realized just how much he needed cash this week. In the end, he let the two guys join the team, thinking there was no way he could skip out on this gate. Lee stared at Bong, unsure if he was actually being serious. Bong just nodded, looking confident. He explained that it was only a D-rank gate, so nothing too wild was supposed to happen. He figured the two of them could take care of it without any big problems. Brings up Lee's money problems. He points out that this week Lee has to cover his mom's hospital bills, his brother's school fees, and his own field trip costs. Lee doesn't really want to agree, but in the end, he gives in. Felt grateful for Lee's support and let him know. Lee just shrugged it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. He pointed out that they also had that F-rank hunter on their side, so things weren't looking too bad. Lee tells the group why he thinks the F-rank hunter isn't going to help much in a fight. He figures that if they just have the guy help the porters carry the bags, the whole luggage situation will be handled. While this is happening, Jun watches them and realizes there's another person getting involved in things. Right then, Lee spots the F-rank hunter walking over. He gets his attention, thinking about how he only asked the guy to grab a cup of coffee, and is kind of surprised it took him so long to show up. The F-rank hunter rushed over out of breath and handed over the coffee, looking a bit embarrassed as he apologized. Lee grabs the coffee and Jun just stands there watching. He can't help but think about how lower-ranked hunters are starting to get treated almost like servants. It hit hits him that Earth isn't much different from the continent of Arx now. Those with power call the shots, and everyone else just has to deal with it. The thought leaves a sour taste in his mouth, even if he can't fully explain why. Lee drops his bags onto the ground, clearly annoyed. He looks at the others, frustrated and confused, trying to figure out what's going on and whether they're actually heading out tomorrow. The hunter starts to speak up, but Lee cuts him off without letting him finish, tells him to stay back and help out with the porters instead. He glances at the old man and the skinny boy, making it clear he doesn't think they're up for carrying all the bags themselves. Lee kept going, not letting up on the guy. He made it clear he only let him join out of kindness, and honestly, if the F-rank hunter tried to go to the front, he'd just slow everyone down. Hearing this, the F-rank hunter just nodded, accepting it without arguing. Lee looked over at Jun and threw out the word ignorant. That word stuck with Jun, echoing in his head. He hadn't expected to hear it, and the surprise caught him off guard. Looks right at him, making it clear he's talking to him. He lets him know straight up that once they're there, staying alive isn't something he'll even get to think about, so he better not get in their way. Here's the comment and his temper flares up. He can't believe anyone would have the nerve to talk about the old man like that. Just the thought of it gets under his skin, and he starts to glare, fists clenched tight. After Lee left, the F-rank hunter stepped up to the pile of bags. He checked out the luggage and went straight for the heaviest one, letting everyone know he was going to carry it. He swings a big bag onto his back. Even though he's not a fighter and probably wouldn't be much help in a battle, he figures at least he can carry some stuff. Being awakened means he's got that little extra edge, even if his main job right now is just hauling bags. Jun gives the guy a quick look and nods. The hunter pauses, unsure for a second, then tries to figure out what's up. Jun says he's got something to tell him, some advice he thinks the hunter should hear. The hunter looks at Jun, caught off guard by what he just heard. Jun, keeping his cool, lets him know that he needs to earn some cash today, no matter what. He isn't interested in getting into any problems. He just wants to focus on making money. The hunter stands there, clearly confused by what's happening. Jun shoots him a piercing look like he can see right through him. It's obvious to Jun that the hunter isn't as clueless or helpless as he seems. Jun makes it clear, without saying much, that the hunter has to keep up this act for the rest of the day. No slipping up. He has to pretend all the way until it's over. Jun looked at them, his face unreadable. He just wanted to help carry their bags and then leave without any trouble. He couldn't figure out why that seemed complicated to anyone. He looked over at, making it clear it was time to head out. Picked up on it right away and got ready to leave, not saying much. When they get to the entrance office, wonders if this is just part of the process to get in. The guy at the desk checked the computer and let know their reservation for the gate near Digital Complex Station was all set. He told them it was okay to head in now, but didn't finish his sentence, leaving it hanging in the air. The employee lets them know that even though this is only a D-rank gate, there have been some deadly accidents here lately. Kept thinking about the words fatal accidents. The employee nodded and explained that the management office had marked the place for investigation. They mentioned the area wasn't supposed to be too tough, but nobody really knew why problems happened there, so it was better to stay alert. Thanked the employee, keeping all that info in mind. A strange purple light started shining outside. It looked like some kind of gate, glowing and out of place. Lee and the hunter dashed toward the gate together. Without slowing down, they slipped through, ready for whatever was waiting on the other side. Jun suggested they should head inside, and agreed without any hesitation. The two of them followed right behind the others and stepped in together. Once Jun steps inside, everything around him goes pitch black. In that empty space, a digital screen pops up right in front of him. The screen starts throwing out messages, stuff about setting up his player info, checking how strong he is, and showing his achievements with little progress bars filling up. It all looks like something straight out of a game, right there in the darkness. Two more messages popped up. The first one said this player was too strong to measure properly. The second one confirmed that his info was all set up. After moving on, the team ends up in a dark, creepy forest. Lee can't shake off the weird vibe coming from the gate nearby. Something about it just doesn't sit right with him. Young kept talking, curious if anyone had mentioned that undead monsters would show up. Nodded, letting him know they had heard about it, and pointed out they needed to wrap things up fast. Jun trails a few steps behind the others, keeping to himself. Out of nowhere, a giant blue window pops up in front of him. It's just him who sees it. No one else seems to notice. On the screen, it shows the player's name, Lee Jun. His class is Necromancer, and he's only at level 1. The titles and stats are all just question marks. Nothing is unlocked yet. There's also a note saying his level isn't high enough to call any followers. Jun looks at the window, confused, trying to figure out what's going on. Jun kept staring at the window, getting more irritated the longer he looked at it. It said he was only level 1, which honestly just felt wrong. He knew how strong he was, but even he couldn't really pin it down, so he didn't get how anyone else could decide that for him. As he kept thinking it over, His mind wandered to this whole idea of divine power. He still wasn't sure what that even meant. Jun always thought titles were kind of cool, so he figured he must unlock the absolute necromancer title when his black magic hit the ninth circle. Just from reading the title, Dimension Invader, he figures out why he got it. It probably has something to do with all the trouble he caused in different worlds while trying to make his way back to Earth. He didn't mean to mess things up, but it looks like his actions had bigger consequences than he expected. When it comes to the title Demon Slayer, he figures he must have taken down over 1,000,000 demons by now. He figured the Dragon Slayer title must come from the time he took down that dragon. After thinking about that for a second, he scrolled over to check out the title for the person who stole from the World Tree. Jun can't help but find it wild that people handed out a whole title just because he took the Divine Tree from the spirit world. All he did was plant it in the palace garden, since the place looked a bit empty. Honestly, he hadn't expected the tree to wither so fast either. Jun checks out the followers section on his screen. As he scrolls through, it hits him. If he boosts his level, he'll actually be able to call on the followers he's already made contracts with. The idea starts to sink in, and he can't help but think about what kind of help they'd bring if he manages to level up. Jun grins to himself, realizing how useful it would be if he could bring not just but also the big shots from the Imperial Court, the palace, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Treasury over to Earth. That would make things a lot easier for him. Right then, Lee noticed Jun losing focus. He glared at him, clearly irritated that Jun wasn't paying attention, especially when things could get dangerous at any second. Lets everyone know it's time to get going. The group moves carefully through the forest, shadows stretching around them. It's quiet, almost like the whole place is holding its breath, and nobody really wants to be the first to break the silence. Every step crunches leaves underfoot, reminding them how alone they are out there. The three hunters led the way, moving ahead while Jun trailed behind them. Looked around the area, clearly bothered by how gross everything was. Nodded along, thinking it'd be best to wrap things up fast and get out as soon as possible. The F-rank hunter glanced back at Jun, and Jun started to think maybe it would be easier if they just went after him. Leaned in close to Jun, quietly letting him know that he actually found the place way more comfortable than he expected. He mentions how his tired body and mind finally seem to be getting better, and Jun just grins, acting like he's the good guy for it. Jun glanced around the thick forest, thinking about how there weren't supposed to be any undead monsters in this area. He looks around and notices that this place reminds him of a place on the continent that everyone's told to stay away from. For the first time, he actually feels refreshed. Out of nowhere, lifts his hand, signaling for everyone to pause. The hunter steps up, focusing hard as blue energy starts to glow in his hands. Lets everyone know it's time to get moving, and the hunter nods, ready to do his part. Suddenly, a bunch of skeletons with weapons started crawling up from the ground right in front of them. Focuses, pulling together his magic until a giant ice spear starts to form right in front of him. He yells and hurls the spear straight at one of the skeletons. He lets loose his attack, and it goes straight through the skeletons. Jun stands there checking out the magical explosion. He isn't super hyped about it, but he pays attention, eyes following the sparks and flashes in the air. Jun kept his eyes on the fight, finding it pretty entertaining. While Lee holds up his massive shield, he blocks the attack and takes down a bunch of skeletons. Jun looks around, sizing up the situation. He notices the skeletons aren't exactly strong, but at least they actually have some shape to them. After the fight wraps up, bones are scattered all over the floor. Lets out a breath, glad it's finally over. To him, it looks like that's the end of it. He tells everyone to grab the before doing anything else. Once that's done, they can focus on what comes next. Jun and the hunter moved quietly through the graveyard, picking up the glowing purple stones that were scattered around the old graves and bones. The stones gave off a faint light, making the whole place look even stranger. They worked together, careful not to make too much noise, keeping an eye out for anything that might be watching them. Each stone they found seemed important, so they made sure to grab as many as they could. Out of nowhere, more skeletons jumped at them. Looked annoyed, thinking about how many times this had already happened and if even more would show up. He raised his shield, pushing back against the next attack, his frustration showing as he braced himself for another round. Lee couldn't stand the skeletons crowding around him, so he started yelling at them to back off. Jun, watching from the side, told him to chill out and think before acting. That only made Lee more annoyed, and he turned to Jun, frustrated, wanting to know why he should bother listening. Jun lets everyone know that there are archers in their group. He stays chill, just pointing it out so the others can be ready. Lee rolls his eyes, thinking that what he just heard sounds ridiculous. Out of nowhere, arrows start flying straight at him. He grumbles under his breath, struggling to lift his shield just in time. Arrows slam into it hard, making his arms shake from the impact. Lee and just stand there, frozen. Lee looks confused, trying to figure out what's going on, while doesn't move a muscle. Both of them clearly didn't see this coming, and it takes them a second to process everything. Right then, an arrow shot straight at Jun's face, but he just reached out and grabbed it with his hand, staying cool the whole time. Jun stares down at the snapped arrow in his hand, clearly frustrated. He can't figure out why it broke, and the whole thing just gets under his skin. Stared at Jun, not really sure how he pulled it off. Lee was just as confused confused, trying to figure out what Jun meant. Jun didn't seem bothered at all and just brushed it off, saying he only got lucky. He looks over at the hunters and calls them out for not paying attention. He's fired up, still pretty mad about almost losing his life because of what happened. After that, he's clearly worn out, mumbling to himself about how rough and unfair it is just trying to get by. Keeps an eye on Jun, his mind racing as he tries to figure out if Jun actually came close to dying. After a moment, figures out that wasn't really the case. He glances down at the arrow on the ground, trying to figure out if that was actually luck or if something else was going on. More skeletons come at him, raises his voice, pointing out that they need to deal with those creatures before anything else. Lee steps up next to him, making it clear that taking them out is the main priority. While the three hunters are busy battling the skeletons up front, Dahl hangs back. He clutches his head, clearly hurting, and looks toward his leader for help. Right then, Jun was busy playing rock, paper, scissors with him. He mentioned he might go with rock this round, but also hinted he could switch it up. Not wanting to deal with the mind games, just wished he'd cut it out. Jun wanted to know why wouldn't join in, saying the game was supposed to be fun, but just groaned about always being the one who got hit, wishing someone would just take him out instead. Jun tried to cheer him up, saying maybe things would go differently this time, and told him to join the next round. While they talked, the F-rank hunter stood off to the side, just watching everything without saying a word. The F-rank hunter can't help but notice how this guy keeps showing up and getting on his nerves. He thinks back to what Jun told him earlier about keeping up the act. Now, looking at Jun, he notices that Jun's got this look, like he's in on something and kind of smug about it. He starts to question whether he's actually part of the management office. While Jun kept playing, he looked over at trying to guess what move he picked next. Really wanted Jun to play by the rules, but Jun just gave him a look that made it clear he didn't appreciate being doubted. Not wanting any trouble, backed off right away. Then, Jun suddenly said he was picking rock this round. Hearing that, felt a rush of excitement and started thinking about picking scissors, hoping he could finally win this time. The F-rank hunter shook his head, pretty sure the office wouldn't send guys this crazy. The F-rank hunter spun around, and Jun's face changed. He looked more focused now, realizing they were almost there. Young stands at the front, taking down the final skeleton. He looks around, thinking this must be the last one left. Looks around, taking it all in. Everything's quiet now, and he knows it's done. He lets out a breath he's been holding, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. It's over. Looked around at the group, noticing how tired everyone seemed after all the effort they put in. He figured it was probably time to call it a day and head back. Out of nowhere, the hunter freezes, his eyes going wide. He stares straight ahead, arms shooting out to point at something up ahead. His voice rises as he tries to get the others' attention, clearly caught off guard by whatever he's just spotted. Through the thick fog, the outline of a big old building, maybe a monastery or a castle, starts to show up in the distance. Right in front of a system window popped up. It let him know that the secret dungeon, Demon Worshipper's Monastery, was now open. Couldn't believe what he was seeing. He started thinking maybe this place was actually a hidden dungeon. The idea caught him off guard, but he kept looking around, trying to figure out if he was really onto something or just overthinking it. He figures this kind of dungeon is the spot where people get lucky, since it's packed with valuable stuff and rare magic books, along with all the rare treasures that you can't find anywhere else. Sometimes there are even special elixirs hidden inside. Gets hyped just thinking about it, and right now, he's sure this is what he wants most. His main goal now is to track down an elixir, the one thing that can bring his mom out of her coma. Kept thinking about how stuff at auctions always goes for way more money than he could ever pay. That made him realize, if he wanted to get one himself, this might be the only shot he'd ever have. He doesn't want to quit, but he's willing to give it a shot. After thinking for a moment, he looks at everyone and asks what they should do next about the hidden dungeon. Stares at the system window, taking it all in. He's never actually seen one up close before, so it feels kind of unreal. In his head, he figures that if they tell the office about it, they might get a small reward, but he knows the office will claim everything else for themselves. Looks around and figures they might as well handle things themselves since they're already there. Lee isn't so sure and thinks out loud, doubting if this group can actually pull it off. To him, it kind of feels like only the two of them are actually strong enough to get the job done. Tries to talk Lee into going for it, saying they're strong enough now, and that it's just a D-rank 8, so nothing too crazy should happen. When Lee looks unsure and asks if he really believes that, nods and says the worst thing waiting for them is just some D-rank stuff. Lee starts getting hyped up and wants to take a shot at it. He figures that if he manages to score a big win, maybe he could finally stop working and chill for the rest of his life. He looks over at the three porters, Jun, and the hunter, wanting to know what they think about the situation. The hunter starts thinking if this job counts as extra hours. He also starts to wonder how much he's actually getting paid for all this overtime. time. Lee casually lifts his hand, showing all 5 fingers. He's letting everyone know he's willing to pay 5 times more than what people usually offer. He tells them to really think it through, since taking this job would make things 5 times more dangerous. The porters start doing the math in their heads. If they usually get 300,000 won a day, then 5 times that would be 1,500,000 won. King Jun jumps right in, excited to join. The Efrang hunter hangs back for a second, not sure at first, but then decides to go along too. Gives a quick nod, letting everyone know the deal's finished and it's time to start the raid. Right after, Lee steps up and says it's time to move out. The group gets ready, knowing things are about to get serious. The 3 porters trail behind the hunters, heading toward the old monastery. As they got closer to the huge, kind of creepy Gothic building, couldn't help but notice how the gate gave off a chilling vibe. He steps forward and lets everyone know he's going in first. The group steps through the massive doors. Jun looks around and realizes it's really dark inside. Seems to notice it too, so everyone slows down and starts moving more carefully. As they moved closer, the door suddenly locked on its own. Suddenly yells out, catching everyone off guard as he points out that the door is about to close. Lee spins around fast, his heart pounding, worried for a second that they might be locked in. The door shut all the way, locking everyone inside. Lee didn't waste any time. He called out for help, urging the others to try and get the door open as he ran over to it himself. He puts his shoulder into the heavy, fancy-looking door, but it doesn't budge. He slams his fist against the door, clearly annoyed. Looking at it, he realizes there's no way it's opening until all the monsters in the area are gone. Stays cool and lets the other guy know they were always planning to see things through. With that settled, the group gets back on track and keeps going. Kept glancing at the locked door, curious about what was behind it. Jun seemed pretty chill, brushing it off and letting know it wasn't a big deal. If things ever got serious, Jun was confident he could break through the barrier spell anyway. With that, he nudged to keep going, not wanting to waste any more time. The group kept moving through a long, dark hallway covered in weird carvings. Noticed how there weren't any monsters around, which felt off. Lee nodded, thinking the same thing. Suddenly comes to a halt and asks the others to hold up. He stares ahead, his eyes wide as he tries to process what's in front of him. Lee isn't any better. His face goes pale, eyebrows raised, clearly caught off guard by whatever they're both looking at. The group walks into a massive hall and the scene stops them in their tracks. Bodies are everywhere and there's blood all over the place, like a serious fight just went down. Lee looks around, totally stunned, struggling to process what he's seeing. Looked around and noticed the place was trashed, like they're deep in a huge fight and nobody made it out okay. Right then, the hunter started calling out, trying to get everyone's attention. At the end of the hallway, there's an altar stained with blood, and on top of it sits this massive statue of a winged demon. Can hardly get his words out as he tries to figure out if he's actually looking at a real demon or if his eyes are playing tricks on him. Jun looks around, trying to figure out what's going on. The place feels strangely familiar, like something he's seen before, but he can't quite put his finger on it. Spots some strange markings carved into the altar. He studies them for a second, thinking they look like some kind of writing he's never seen before, almost like it came from a totally different world. Jun told to translate the message, nodded, letting him know he'd take care of it. Leaned in, checking out the strange markings. He pointed out that these symbols came straight from the demon world. Looks over at, curious about the papers in front of them. Calmly adjusts his monocle, getting ready to read the documents out loud for everyone. Looks over the first part, seeing that it says the trial has to be passed, and that someone needs to prove they're worthy. Thinks about what that actually means and tries to figure out what kind of trial they're talking about. Glances around at the bodies lying everywhere. He figures out that the challenge must have been to fight the monsters guarding this spot. Since nobody else made it, he realizes they've already beaten the test. Kept reading, his finger landing on a line about faith and loyalty. The words explained that to prove yourself, you had to bring 10 living people as an offering on the altar. Lee stared at the words on the page, his face twisting in annoyance. He couldn't believe what he was reading. Who came up with this stuff anyway? It made no sense to him, and he just wanted to scroll past it as fast as possible. Suh keeps reading, telling everyone that the words are about some powerful guardian from the underworld. The message says people have to kneel and ask this guardian for forgiveness if they want a chance to make it out alive. Only the ones he decides to forgive get to leave. Dahl looked at the blood-stained altar and the candles flickering around it. Even though the scene was kind of creepy, he couldn't help but be impressed. He noticed right away that the altar wasn't normal. It was set up with some serious magic, the kind that could actually call up a high-level demon. Lee gets fired up, his face turning red as he starts yelling at the old man. He really can't believe what he's hearing and just lets his frustration out, not holding back as he calls the guy out for being clueless. Stays cool and points at some markings on the wall. He lets the others know those symbols stand for the fire of hell. He talks about how the fire of hell never goes out. It burns forever, using up people's life energy to keep itself going. He also mentions that this kind of fire is usually used when someone wants to bring demons into the world. Notices something messed up about the altar. He figures out that every single flame burning there means someone had to lose their life for it. When he counts the candles, there are already 9 of them glowing, and that really hits him hard. Realized there had already been 9 sacrifices. He figured out that one more would finish the ritual. He wondered if all of this was meant to bring out the demon and ask for mercy. Nodded, saying that's what the plaque said. Lee lets out a short laugh, clearly doubting whether anyone actually buys into that. Out of nowhere, the hunter steps in, cutting through the tension. He looks serious and tells everyone it's time to decide what they're going to do. Glances over, not really getting what the hunter means, but the hunter just stares back with this intense look, clutching his bag. It's almost like he's wondering if everyone is just planning to sit around and wait for the worst. Still looks lost, clearly not on the same page as the hunter. The hunter kept talking, his voice sounding dark and serious. He said the moment everyone had been waiting for was finally here, and that one of the group was about to face what was coming. Young stares at him, eyes wide and heart-pounding. He can't figure out what's going on in the other guy's head, but the expression on his face is enough to make uneasy. The F-rank hunter suddenly cracks up, laughing way harder than anyone expected. Lee couldn't hold back his anger. His face was tense and he glared at, making it clear that he wasn't joking around. Across from him, looked really nervous, almost frozen, like he wanted to disappear. The tension between them was obvious and no one was laughing. The hunter smirked, not really sorry at all. He looked around at everyone, clearly amused by how scared they all looked. Just seeing them like that made him laugh to himself. He stands there, his voice flat and serious, letting everyone know it's time to pick the next person to be sacrificed. As he looks around, it's clear he's sizing everyone up, trying to figure out who he thinks is the least valuable in the group. The room gets tense, and everyone can feel the pressure as they realize what's about to happen. Stands his ground, not backing down. He believes there's got to be a way out for everyone if they just look hard enough. He doesn't want to give up, certain that if they keep searching, they'll find a solution where no one has to get left behind. Young watched the man and thought he was out of his mind. In his head, he figured if someone had to die, it should be one of the older guys who'd already had their time. His eyes drifted over to, and Jun, sizing them up without saying a word. Spots that someone's staring right at them. He starts to think about whether he's the person who was supposed to live for a really long time. Then it hits him. He isn't even human. He started to worry, thinking that maybe the person being talked about was his master, who'd been around for over 300 years. Leans in close to Jun, his voice low and nervous. He hopes Jun isn't mad at him, and tries to explain that there are people out there acting rude and disrespectful, like they're coming after Jun on purpose. Mentions that they're talking about Jun's age too, almost like they think he's been around too long. Jun just looks at him, totally chill, and makes it clear he's the one they're talking about. Sue couldn't help but scratch his head, still unsure if Jun was actually talking about him. But Jun just nodded, giving Sue that look that said, yeah, it's really you. Remembered how lost at rock, paper, scissors earlier, so he told him to stay put. Didn't argue and just listened. Right then, raised his voice, telling everyone not to panic. He wanted them to slow down and figure out a way for all of them to make it through together. Lee's temper flared as he glared at. He couldn't stand how always acted so righteous, and he let it show. Lee insisted that he was right about the situation and made it clear that if things kept going the way they were, none of them would make it out. The tension in the room grew, and everyone could feel the pressure of Lee's warning. He's clearly mad, blaming for starting this whole thing. Meanwhile, tries to keep things cool, reminding him that fighting about who's right isn't going to fix the problem. Lee shot him a glare full of anger and disgust. It was clear he had no patience left, and he basically wished the other guy would just give up for good if he was going to keep pretending. Stares at Lee, totally thrown off by what he just said. It's clear he's not sure what to think. Lee just gives him a look, kind of messing with him, like he can't believe doesn't get it. You can tell's confused, while Lee acts like it's obvious. Out of nowhere, the F-rank hunter bursts into laughter. He can't help himself. It's like he finds the whole situation way too funny. Even though things are pretty intense, he just stands there, clearly entertained by what's going on. When people get pushed into a corner, their true colors start to show. They can end up acting in ways you wouldn't expect, sometimes not so great. Lee shot the guy an angry look, clearly annoyed and trying to figure out what was up with him. The hunter just stayed calm, making it obvious that he thought fighting anymore was pointless since everything was already settled. The F-rank hunter finally showed who he really was. All along, he'd planned to take everyone out, never meaning to help. He starts getting ready to use some magic. Dark purple energy started swirling around him, giving off a weird, heavy vibe. Out of nowhere, skeletons began clawing their way up from the ground, all because of his magic. Lee suddenly gets hit with the awful truth. He's a necromancer. Panic kicks in and he's instantly furious. his frustration boiling over as he tries to lash out at the person in front of him. The necromancer, once known as an hunter, grinned slyly. It was clear that everyone finally understood who he really was. Without holding back anymore, he let them know he was actually a hunter-killer from the Anti-Office Alliance. He lets Lee know he's not some low-level nobody. He's actually ranked A, which sets him apart from the rest. In his mind, he's on a whole different level, someone who's worth paying attention to. Lee just stands there, frozen for a moment, while the name of the Alliance runs through his head again and again. It takes him a second to process what he's just heard, and he can't help but be thrown off by it. He remembered how they, unlike the Hunter's office, thought people with special powers should keep all the money and power for themselves. He realizes this guy is actually a killer who goes after hunters connected to the office. Stares out at the sea of skeletons the necromancer brought to life. He tries to count, but there are so many, it's hard to keep track. In his head, he guesses there could be 20, maybe even 30 of them. It's a lot more than he expected, and the situation is starting to get to him. He suddenly notices that there's an A-rank killer right in front of them. Looked over and told everyone there was no way they could win. Hearing that, Lee just dropped to his knees, totally defeated like he'd already given up. He thought it was all over and figured they were finished, but wasn't letting it go. He got mad and pushed back, basically telling everyone they couldn't just quit and had to at least put up a fight. The necromancer stretched out his hand, aiming it at who was already down. There was this smug look on his face, almost like he was making fun of for being so helpless. It was clear he wanted to just give up and accept whatever was coming, like he was nothing more than a piece in some bigger plan. Right then, Jun steps up and faces the necromancer. He tells him to hold off, saying it'd actually be a hassle if those guys died right now. The necromancer looks at him, clearly not expecting that, but Jun stands his ground, making it clear he's got unfinished business with those people. Jun stepped up to face the necromancer, who used to be an F-rank hunter. He reminded the guy that he'd already given him a heads up to keep acting like nothing was up all the way to the end. When the necromancer questions Jun about whether he's from the office, Jun quickly says no. But the necromancer doesn't let it go and keeps pressing him, wanting to know where he really comes from. Jun just tells them he came from his place over in. The necromancer could tell Jun wasn't about to spill who he was working with, so he decided to press him again, this time wanting to know exactly how Jun had ended up in this place. Jun just shrugs off the question and jokes that he got there on a direct bus from station. The necromancer doesn't seem to buy it, clearly thinking the explanation makes no sense. But Jun doesn't care. He knows the guy will be annoyed with him no matter what he says. Jun, not wanting to stick with the awkward topic, shifts gears and gets curious about what his opponent was thinking summoning a demon in the first place. The necromancer shares his plan to bring out one of those big-shot demons from the old legends. Jun hears the name and it clicks. He's sure he's heard it somewhere before. The necromancer starts talking about his plan to show loyalty to and make some kind of deal to serve him. But before he can finish, Jun cuts him off. Jun seems to get what's going on now. The necromancer kept talking about his goal, saying he wanted to use huge power to change the world. But Jun cut him off, realizing why the necromancer's face had seemed familiar to him all along. Jun just throws it out there, saying he's pretty sure he took down most of the 72 demons the last time they showed up. He doesn't brag, he just says it like it's no big deal, almost as if he's talking about what he had for lunch. He suddenly remembered the time he fought them. The memory flashed through his mind, clear as day, and he could almost feel the adrenaline rushing back. He starts to think about whether this could have been one of the rare ones who actually got away and made it out alive back then. As he's lost in thought, another memory flashes in his mind, a demon running for its life. The necromancer doesn't pay attention to what's being said. He stands his ground, making it clear that for his own reasons, Jun has to die. The necromancer calls up a bunch of skeletons and shadowy creatures with his dark magic. Right then, feels desperate, thinking it's ridiculous that he might actually die like this. Stood there looking down and feeling pretty guilty. He knew things had gotten messed up because he wanted too much, and now everyone else was dealing with it. As he apologized, the others could tell he was serious. He understood that trying to get more than he should was what got them all stuck in this mess. June steps up, walking right past, who looks totally desperate. June just keeps it real and points out that everyone's going to die someday, but today isn't that day. Watches him, confused, not really getting what June is trying to say. Jun stands there, staring down the necromancer and all the creepy undead creatures he just summoned. It's tense, and Jun can feel his heart pounding, but he keeps his focus, not backing down even when the odds look rough. He looked at him with this icy stare, letting him know that if he really wanted him gone, he'd have to cough up the money he owed. Only then would he even think about going through with it. Right after he finishes talking, he sends out this massive wave of black and purple mana that rushes through the whole hall. The necromancer stares at Jun, his eyes wide. He can't believe what he's seeing. It's not every day someone shows up with black mana this strong, and he's trying to figure out how Jun even has it. The necromancer suddenly notices something about Jun's black mana. It's a lot like his own, but there's a huge difference in how strong it is. The realization hits him hard, leaving him frozen for a moment as he tries to process what this could mean. Jun's reflection showed up in his eyes just as fear took over. He freezes up, completely terrified, as a huge, scary shadow rises up behind Jun. It looks just like the Grim Reaper. The necromancer freaks out, finally realizing he's face to face with the Reaper himself. He drops to the ground, totally frozen by fear. Panic takes over, and all he can think about is getting away. Escaping is the only thing that matters now. Right then, Jun raises his voice and calls by his real name. He nods right away, not hesitating for even a second. Jun steps forward, telling to get ready and show some respect. Eyes suddenly light up red as he starts making a big official announcement. He lets everyone know that something really strange and dangerous is about to happen. An irregular catastrophe is on its way. He keeps talking, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. He points out Jun, calling him the king of the dead, the guy who basically controls everyone still alive. Finishes what he has to say, turning his attention to the nervous necromancer. The powerful immortal stands tall, showing respect to the emperor, while shadows twist around him, giving off a dark, mysterious vibe. All the skeletons drop down to their knees, and that's how the scene wraps up. Stands there, eyes wide, not really sure what to do next. Everything around him feels unreal, like time just hit pause. He can't believe what he's seeing, and for a second it's like the world's gone quiet. He stood there, confused, trying to figure out what was going on. While all this was happening, the necromancer, who had been acting like he was just a weak E-rank hunter, dropped to his knees in front of Jun. He looked desperate, bowing his head low and asking for another chance, hoping Jun would let him go. Jun stood there, shadows swirling around him. Even though he looked tough on the outside, deep down he wished he could just have a regular life like everyone else. Jun walked up to the necromancer, who was still kneeling on the ground. He crouched down in front of him, looking calm. Deep down, Jun just wanted things to be chill and low-key. He never wanted to stand out or get caught up in all this drama. He grabs the necromancer by the face and makes him look up. The guy acts like the necromancer's whole wish for a peaceful life is some big, noble thing, but you can tell he's not buying it. Right then, Jun's eyes lit up bright red, showing off a weird symbol. The terrified necromancer caught the whole thing in his own reflection, frozen in place. Also known as, notices right away when his master's demonic eye turns on. He can tell something's up just by the change in his master's look. It's not the kind of thing you see every day, and knows this means serious business. Lets them know that this is a serious illusion trick. Anyone who locks eyes with his master ends up trapped in a nightmare that feels way too real. Points out that if his master is way stronger than someone else, things get a lot worse for that person. The necromancer totally loses it as his mind gets hit with nightmare images, creepy monsters everywhere, and everything just soaked in blood. The necromancer drops to the ground, out cold and shaking, stares at the scene, totally lost. He can't figure out what's going on or why this guy Jun just showed up. Jun got to his feet and stared down at the body on the ground. He thought it was kind of impressive. The necromancer had actually stayed awake longer than most people did against him. Jun looks over at his eyes narrowing. It's pretty clear he's reminding what happened to the necromancer, kind of warning him without saying much. The message hangs in the air and can tell Jun isn't messing around. Tries to back away, his hands shaking. He looks scared and can barely get the words out. Jun gave him a look that meant he needed to be careful with what he said next. Right then, moved ahead, waiting for a sign from his master that he could speak up. He wonders out loud if taking out is the only way to keep things quiet. Freezes, fear written all over his face as he realizes just how serious things have gotten. Jun just shrugs it off, acting like it's no big deal. He lets everyone know he's already put a spell on the guy to keep him in check. After hearing the news, Sue thinks it's time to stop messing around and just summon the demon already. He figures that's their best shot at getting out of this mess. Jun nods, ready to go along with the plan. The two of them start to get serious, knowing what they have to do next. They said that if the summoned demon doesn't do what they want, they'll take care of it themselves and figure something else out. Jun glanced down at the necromancer's body sprawled on the floor, taking in the scene. He tells the skeletons, who are still kneeling, to get the demon to show up. The skeletons got up right away, grabbed the necromancer's body, and hauled it over to the altar. One of them lifted its sword and drove it down, making the necromancer the 10th offering. Blood sprayed out across the altar as stared, his hand clamped over his mouth, frozen by what he just saw. As the last candle on the altar flickered to life, a huge wave of dark energy burst out from the center. Gu takes a step back as a massive, winged demon that looks like a gargoyle shakes on top of the altar. Jun checked out the creature that just showed up. He thought it made a pretty strong entrance. Meanwhile, the summoned demon couldn't get that one day out of his head, even after all these years. He still remembered standing there, watching his own kind get wiped out right in front of him. No matter how much time passed, that memory never faded. He remembers how the few people who survived had no choice but to split up and go their separate ways. After that big fight where he lost his powers, he ended up weak and on the run, moving from one strange world to another. Even though it was tough, the thing that kept him going was his need to get back at those who'd ruined everything. Finally senses his strength coming back. He's pretty sure he's managed to get a bit of his old power back and show up in this weird new place, ready to see what's waiting for him. The demon let out a roar that shook the whole place. He wanted to know who had called him and who was bold enough to try making a deal with the guardian of hell and one of the 72 demons. Looks around and realizes this new place has everything he needs. It's the perfect spot for him to get his strength back and figure out how he's going to get payback. With that in mind, he decides he's in and goes along with the plan. King Jun stared at the demon. After a moment, something clicked. He finally recognized who it was. Pauses, looking a bit lost. The voice rings a bell, but he can't quite place where he's heard it before. Jun smiled, looking over at him, and wondered if he'd actually been the one who took off first back then. Spots Jun and suddenly freezes, his face going pale as he stares at him. He starts questioning to himself if this could really be the immortal he's heard about. Jun just looks at him, kind of amused, and thinks to himself how, if you stick around long enough, you eventually run into everyone again. He finds it kind of funny that their paths would cross in a place like this. It had been a while since they'd last seen each other, and honestly he was kind of glad to run into him again. Looked scared, trying to figure out what Jun was even doing in a place like this. The area was empty, nothing worth seeing, and it seemed pointless to be here. But Jun just let him know this was where he came from, his old home, even if it didn't look like much. Right away, tried to act all positive, saying how awesome this dimension was. But deep down, he was freaking out, thinking he was basically done for. Last time, he at least had a shot at escaping, but now things felt way more hopeless. Thinks back to when all 72 demons were together, but even then, they got completely wiped out. Now, looking at himself, he knows he doesn't stand a chance against the immortal by himself. Looks around and realizes this might be his only shot to get out. With Jun busy and not paying attention, starts planning his move, ready to slip away when the moment is right. He keeps telling himself that one day, he'll get all his lost brothers back together and get payback. There's no way this is how things end for him. Freaks out right away and starts pleading for his life, using Jun's big scary title. But Jun's not having any of that and just tells him to cut it out and talk like a regular person. Doesn't waste any time and just keeps begging, desperate to stay alive. He insists he got pulled into all this because of the summoning ritual and never planned to mess with Jun's home. He keeps pleading, promising he'll vanish for good and go somewhere far away where no one will ever find him. All he wants now is to be left alone, hoping he can just live out the rest of his days quietly, away from everyone. Jun listens for a moment, then nods like he gets what's going on. Just stares at him, totally lost and not sure what Jun means. Jun reminded everyone that he'd already agreed to go. He glanced over at, hinting that maybe something good was waiting for them back in Seoul. With that in mind, he figured they should just wrap things up here and head home. Feels pumped and grateful as he thinks about everything the great immortal has done for him. He can't help but appreciate how much he's been given, and it shows in the way he stands there, almost in awe, just taking it all in. As Jun started to walk away, something from the 365-day parenting guide popped into his head. It talked about how having pets can really help kids grow emotionally. The thought stuck with him as he headed out. People who grow up with pets usually end up smarter and understand others better. Started to step back, looking like he was about to leave. But just as he was turning away, Jun stopped him and told him to hang on for a second. Stops right where he is, tense and uneasy, trying to figure out what the guy is after. Jun stared at the guy for a second, then just told him to bark like it was no big deal. Just stands there not really sure what to think. He can't believe what he's hearing. Jun doesn't back down, just tells him again to bark like he expects to actually go along with it. Is left trying to process what's going on, looking pretty lost. Watches his hands clench tight. He's ticked off, his mind racing with questions about why the immortal would treat him like this. All he can do is stare, frustration building inside him. The demon stands there, shaking with embarrassment. He wonders why the immortal would do something so embarrassing to him. Jun stared at him, his eyes cold and unreadable. He didn't say much, just made it clear that he expected more. The message was simple. Step it up. In the end, can't hold it in any longer and lets out a loud bark. Deep down, he tells himself that he'll always remember how embarrassed he felt today. Jun noticed how well was handling things, almost impressed. Still a bit embarrassed from earlier, just took it in stride, acting like he didn't mind the attention. Jun explained that he wasn't trying to compliment anyone. He actually meant it. He really did look like a real dog. Couldn't help but laugh, nodding along. He thought it was wild just how much Jun could pull off that dog look. Can hardly believe what's happened to him. Deep down, he's mad, really mad, about how things have turned out. He used to be one of the 72 demons in charge of the whole demon world, someone everyone respected and feared. Now, just thinking about where he is now compared to back then makes his blood boil. Jun let know he made it. Then he turned to him and wanted to see if could change his form. Stands there, unsure what to do next. He looks around, trying to figure out what everyone expects from him. He doesn't know what he's supposed to turn into, and it shows on his face. face. Jun pauses, trying to figure out which puppies 3-year-old girls usually like. Starts to freak out inside. He can't shake the idea that he's different from everyone else around him, like he's the odd one out, even among demons. He became well known for how strong and ruthless he was. Everyone started calling him the guardian of hell. Along with his 72 brothers, he led the demon world from the very top. He suddenly realized he'd turned into a small, chubby corgi. He was panting, looking down at his new paws, totally confused about what just happened. It didn't seem real, and he couldn't believe this was actually happening to him. Jun looked at the little guy, thinking he was definitely cute, but something didn't quite add up. Before he could say much else, jumped in, pointing out that, honestly, this should be good enough for a pet. Jun didn't see it the same way. He thought the guy looked pretty weak and noticed his legs weren't all that long, so he probably wouldn't move that well. Just shrugged it off, saying stuff like the guy's tough on the inside, so they might as well just go with whatever Saul wanted. Stuck in his corgi body, stewed over how everyone treated him like a joke. He couldn't stand the way they looked down on him, and the sting of today's embarrassment burned in his mind. He promised himself he wouldn't let it slide and planned to pay them back when the time was right. Jun looked at him with a cold stare, not showing any emotion. Clearly nervous and shaking a little, nodded, and did what Jun wanted without arguing. Changed shape and turned into a small, fluffy white Pomeranian. Jun didn't look impressed and asked to see another form. Shifted again, this time becoming a long-haired dog. Still, Jun wanted to see what else could do and asked for the next transformation. Jun turns into a dachshund, looking even more annoyed than before. Not wasting any time, he signals to move on and check out the next person. Shifts back into his corgi shape, and Jun looks at him, trying to figure out if something's up. Looks confused, not sure who Jun is talking about. It takes him a second to realize Jun actually means him. The idea throws off. He can't believe Jun would really say that to him. King Jun narrowed his eyes, sizing things up before signaling for the next form to be brought in. Quickly changes shape, shrinking down until he's just a small Doberman. Jun's eyes go wide when he sees it, and a big grin spreads across his face. He looks impressed, clearly thinking it's pretty cool. He says this one's his favorite so far, then bends down and gives the Doberman a pat on the head. Trapped in the dog's body, gets annoyed. He doesn't like being treated like some regular pet, especially since he's actually one of the top demons from the underworld. Jun keeps running his hand over the dog's fur, not really thinking about anything else. The dog seems to relax a little more with each gentle stroke, almost like he's starting to trust Jun. Notices how good the touch feels, and for a second he just wants to wag his tail. Doll Su looked at the idea and thought it nailed what both Jun and Soul liked. Jun was always into stuff that gave off a strong, powerful vibe, while Soul preferred things that were just plain cute. Su figured this idea would work for both of them. He also guessed the princess would totally be into it. Jun picked up the Doberman and turned to, wanting to know what he thought. Couldn't hide how impressed he was. He just stared at Jun, thinking he looked awesome with the dog in his arms. Jun scoops up and gets ready to head back. Can't help but feel embarrassed getting carried like this, but there's also this weird sense of contentment he can't really explain. Jun started walking away, thinking everything was settled, but then spoke up from behind them, sounding nervous and calling Jun sir. Jun paused, surprised that was talking to him, and looked back. Nodded, getting ready to say what was on his mind. Thought it'd make sense to grab the body before they left, just to keep things from getting messy later. Jun wanted to know what handling actually meant. Told him this was something serious, tied to the Anti-Bureau of Management Union. He made it clear the Bureau of Management would look into the whole thing carefully, leaving no stone unturned. Jun really can't stand it when things get complicated. He doesn't like it when people start watching him or paying extra attention, especially when there's no real reason for it. Jun kept talking, telling how impressive he was earlier and that he'd actually saved his life. Deep down, Jun didn't really see himself as a hunter. Meanwhile, just looked confused, not sure what Jun meant. Acts like he doesn't get what Jun is talking about. Jun puts a hand on shoulder and tells him he was talking about how stepped up and took out this villain in one hit. Looks surprised, almost like he can't believe he actually did it. Jun glances over at, noticing how lost he looks, almost like someone trying to solve math problems way too hard for class. Jun just lets him know that things haven't been easy lately. Wipes the sweat from his forehead, looking nervous. He tries to play it cool, saying he only did what he thought was right. Jun gave a quick pat on the shoulder. He thought straightforward attitude was pretty cool, and it showed in the way he looked at him. Jun signals that it's time to move out. Right then, a bright blue portal appears on the altar, which is still marked with streaks of blood. Jun carried Weil and followed close behind, as they all stepped through the portal together. Stood just outside the gate, chatting with a guy from the Bureau of Management. The official seemed pretty relieved, saying this whole thing came out of nowhere, but at least nobody got badly hurt and everyone made it back. The official let know that the body had been identified. It turned out to be a killer from the Anti-Bureau of the Management Union, someone who'd actually been on the wanted list. The guy from the Gates Special Investigations Division let know they were putting together a team to dig deeper into everything that happened. He also mentioned they'd be needing more info from himself, so they'd ask him to talk again soon. Wasn't thrilled about it, but he nodded and went along with their plan. The official explains that when the investigation wraps up, everyone will hear about what happened on the news. Looks uneasy, stuck on that thought, unsure if the story will actually make it out to the public. Watches as the paramedics load the body onto a stretcher, wrapped up and still. He can't help but think about how close they all came to ending up just like that. If Mr. June hadn't stepped in, it probably would have been them getting carried away instead. The official quickly steers the conversation in a different direction and asks Mr. about having a second awakening lately. Looks puzzled, not really sure what the official means. The official points out that the report clearly says, took out the hunter from the Anti-Bureau of Management Union all by himself. Shifts in his seat, his nerves showing as he tries to play it cool. He tells himself he just got lucky, hoping no one sees how uneasy he actually feels. The official tells that being too humble isn't always a good thing. Then he drops some news. The guy took down actually had a price on his head. Hearing the word bounty catches off guard, and he doesn't really know what to make of it. The official lets everyone know just how serious things are. The price on his head was way up in the hundreds of millions. With numbers like that, it's pretty clear he's a big deal, and the Bureau of Management probably has some kind of reward lined up for him. The official kept hyping up, saying he'd probably get calls from all the big guilds soon. Once the news got out, was going to be famous. Everyone would know his name just like that. The official couldn't help but picture what the news would say about the national hero and a rookie with a C rank. People would probably talk about how this rookie took down an A rank killer with just one hit. The official wondered if could already see those headlines in his head too. Realizes things are starting to spiral, and he's not sure what to do next. Even so, he can't deny that Jun really came through for him and basically saved him when it mattered most. Jun and stopped by a food truck, checking out what was on offer. Looked like he'd just bitten into a fireball. He started panting and waved his hand in front of his mouth, clearly not expecting the food to be this spicy. Jun just watched while tried to cool down, probably wondering how something could burn this much. Jun could tell was struggling with the food and let him know it was okay to stop. Just sat there, barely able to taste anything, his tongue totally numb. Off in the distance, kept an eye on the two of them, trying to figure out who this new guy really was. Kept eating, barely able to slow down, like his hands just moved on their own. The food was unbelievably good, almost too good to be normal. Even though everything around him felt heavy and rough, he just couldn't stop. Across the room, watched Jun and couldn't help but wonder how Jun managed to take down a top-level opponent so easily, without even breaking a sweat. Jun held who looked like a big Doberman in his arms. He turned to, wanting to know who made the food. Just shook his head, pretending he had nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, couldn't help but remember how the boss monster had begged to be spared earlier, looking pretty desperate and weak. Couldn't figure out why a guy like Jun would bother pretending to be a porter. It didn't make sense to him. While was lost in thought, Jun started talking to about food, saying they should go for spicy stir-fried chicken noodles next time since they taste way better than. Started to wonder if Jun was actually hiding from the Bureau of Management, maybe even running from something big. But then he shook off the idea. If Jun really was some dangerous criminal, he probably would taken out by now. Can't help but get hyped, thinking there might be food out there even tastier than this crazy meal. The idea alone is enough to make him look forward to what's next. Meanwhile, sizes up Jun and figures the guy must be at least S-rank. Tries to figure out who this guy really is, but he just can't pin it down. He knew he had to become that person's student, no matter what. It was the only way to level up and finally get his hands on the elixir. Later on, walks up to Jun and he hands Jun an envelope full of cash. Jun looks a bit unsure, thinking the amount seems like more than expected. Just nods, letting him know that even though it's more than he said he'd give, Jun did save his life. Jun takes the money, thinking about how he'll put it to good use. He figures that if they ever run into each other again, maybe he'll find a way to pay it back. As he and start to head out, suddenly calls out, wanting them to wait. He doesn't want to just let them go after everything, so he asks if he can at least treat Jun to a meal. Jun didn't go for it. He said his family was waiting, so maybe next time. Started getting anxious. He really didn't want to miss his shot, so he quickly called out to Jun's boss. He really wanted just a little more time, maybe a glass of soju, or even just an hour. Honestly, even half an hour would have been enough for him. Jun suddenly freezes, caught off guard by what just happened. His friend couldn't believe what he just heard and looked at him, eyebrows raised. Right then, a bottle of soju popped up in the background, all shiny and kind of tempting. Still unsure, nodded slowly, trying to explain that, yeah, he really did mean soju. Jun looked at the bottle and realized it really was soju, just like he remembered. He couldn't help but think, wow, Earth actually has soju. Back when he was emperor over all of, he tasted every well-known drink out there, but not a single one could beat the taste of soju. Even with all that power and all those choices, nothing else really compared. He remembered how he'd spent years trying to make it again. He realized this was way over his head. Back in the present, Jun nodded and went along with Saidia. He let him know they'd have a glass of soju together, settling into the moment. Everyone headed over to the grandma's hangover soup place. Inside, Jun tipped back a shot of soju, letting out a quiet breath. It had been a while since he'd tasted it, and he realized just how much he'd missed that familiar flavor. Across the table, dug into his like he hadn't eaten all day. He thought it was legit, super hot, tasty, and packed with spice that hit him hard, almost like jumping into a volcano. While he ate, his mind randomly drifted off, wondering when a vampire lord last had a taste of blood. Kept eating, really into the food, acting like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Watched him and the others, kind of amused, thinking they were going overboard, like they hadn't had soju or hangover soup in forever. He wondered if maybe he should get another round for them. Jun and both nodded right away, not even hesitating, and it made realize those two must have had a really rough time. Pulled out his phone and contacted the restaurant owner. He let her know he wanted another bottle of soju and an extra bowl of. Looked at the elderly woman and just called her old woman, not bothering with her name. He told her he was grateful for everything she'd done, but deep down, he just couldn't figure out why she'd put something else ahead of her own well-being. He really wanted her to slow down and look after herself. When she heard him say this, she stared at him, completely surprised. She looked over at him, wondering if they'd met before. Then, almost like she'd caught on to what he was thinking, she told him straight up that if he was trying to hit on her, he should knock it off and just focus on his food. Dahl felt a little protective and tried to reassure her. As he stared at the bowl of red soup, he promised himself he wouldn't leave a drop behind. To him, this meal was the result of all the effort she'd put in, and he didn't want any of it to go to waste. Meanwhile, the lady just looked at him, confused about what was going on in his head. Kept thinking about it. To him, the way she just gave her own blood to help make the dish, and then acted like it was no big deal, made her seem like a real saint. Glanced over at and caught him looking pretty emotional. He wondered if was actually tearing up, and it made him think that must gone through some rough stuff. While Jun was busy scarfing down his food and chugging his drink, he glanced over at. He noticed hadn't touched his meal yet and seemed curious about it. Took his time with his food, not rushing like everyone else. When his name was said wrong, he calmly pointed it out and let them know his real name was. Listened as Jun explained that he didn't want to be called Sir. Jun just wanted to use his name and was cool with that. After all that went down, looked at Jun and asked if he could be his student. Jun couldn't believe what he just heard. He just stared for a second, then shut the idea down right away, not even thinking twice about it. Looked let down, but it was clear he'd seen this coming. He already figured things would turn out this way. He started talking about how he was an F-rank hunter, like it was just another fact about himself. Jun cut him off just as he picked up his soup bowl. He said he couldn't really handle sad stories, but was willing to hear one if it counted as the price for dinner. Looked up, caught off guard, and wondered if Jun was actually being for real. Talked about why he kept hunting. With his sister's school fees, all the stuff they needed at home, and his mom's hospital bills piling up, he just couldn't find another job that paid enough to cover everything. Quitting wasn't really an option. He had to keep going, no matter what. He explained that if he wanted to help his mom get better, he'd have to find a special healing remedy called the elixir. Hearing this, Jun was caught off guard. The name stuck in his head, and he couldn't help but wonder what the elixir really was. He figured that if he was serious about what was on his mind, there had to be 12 bottles of it stashed away in the Imperial Treasury over in. Kept talking about his dream, even though he knew it was pretty far-fetched. Still, he believed that with the elixir, anyone could decide their own worth. He mentioned that the elixir is super rare, worth so much that people pay ridiculous amounts for it, sometimes even in the hundreds of billions. But honestly, it's not even about the money. You can't just buy it no matter how much cash you have. While he was explaining all that, Jun, who was sipping his soup, suddenly started choking. Jun started coughing hard, glancing over at, who didn't even seem to notice and just kept eating. In his head, Jun was annoyed at himself for not bringing a drink. He knew always had random stuff crammed in his bag, so it wouldn't have hurt if he had packed a water bottle this time, too. Leaned in, trying to figure out what Jun had just mumbled. He said he didn't catch it, hoping Jun would repeat himself, but Jun just brushed it off, acting like it wasn't important, and moved on without giving an answer. Bongo kept talking while he poured the drink, telling Jun that the only way to get the elixir was to go grab it himself. He didn't really have another option, so he just kept going into those gates. Jun looked at him and wondered if Bongo had faced all that by himself without any help. Bongo nodded, letting everyone know he'd come close to dying more than once and had spent months stuck in bed recovering from his injuries. Even with all that, he didn't give up and kept pushing until he finally reached C-rank. Jun listened to Bongo's story and couldn't help but think that his life seemed straight out of a book. Bongo started to question himself, not really sure if that's what he believed. He remembered how things were before the gates showed up. Life was good, and people were actually happy. That memory stuck with him, pushing him to keep going, no matter how tough things got. He wanted to bring back those good days, and he wasn't planning to give up until he did. Bongo's eyes started to water, and tears slid down his cheeks. Something inside him just hit hard, and he couldn't hold it in anymore. Jun watched him in silence as Bongo tried to get his attention, calling out his name. He knew he had to get stronger fast, because his mom was running out of time. He started asking over and over, hoping to be accepted as a student. He was desperate for another shot, and promised he'd do whatever it took, no questions asked. King Jun saw Bong Po standing there, tears running down his face in front of the whole crowd. He looked at Bong Po, wondering what could make a grown man break down like that with everyone watching. Quickly said sorry and pointed out his real name, hoping Jun would get it right. But Jun didn't seem too bothered about the name mistake. Instead, he told to stop tearing up and to stand up straight like he should be proud of himself. Straightened up, looking pretty pumped. In his head, he decided he'd just go by Bong Po. Jun gave him a new name, Bong Tai, and wanted to see if he was actually ready to do whatever was needed. Bong didn't even hesitate. He was all in, totally sure he could handle whatever came his way. As he agreed, he thought the new name sounded pretty cool anyway. Jun gave him a rundown of everything he'd have to do, cleaning the place, handling the laundry, cooking meals, looking after the kids, and even walking the dog. He wanted to see if the guy thought he could actually take on all that work. Noticed how oddly specific these tasks were, but he didn't waste any time. He just nodded and said he'd handle it all, barely hesitating. Jun thought it was a good idea since it might take some pressure off his sister, who put in long hours every day. Then, out of nowhere, he mentioned wanting to borrow his identity. Was caught off guard, not really sure what Jun meant by that. Jun told them he was talking about his awakened registration card. He figured this would help him avoid paying the usual registration fees. Jun kept his plan in mind. He figured he'd sign up for gate raids using his name, tag along as the porter, and take care of the monsters by himself. That way, he wouldn't have to stress about money. He kept telling himself that even if he beat the toughest gates, he could still stay out of the spotlight and skip all the attention that came with it. He finished thinking that maybe Bong Pal would end up being the one to get famous instead of him. Still, he turned to Bong again, wanting to know if he really believed he could pull it off. Later on outside, was hanging out in his Doberman form when two women walked up to him. One of them couldn't help but gush about how cute he looked, and the other started looking around, curious about where his owner might be. Looked at them, annoyed and pretty ticked off. He couldn't believe they had the nerve to treat him like some random dog, acting like they had no clue who he really was. One of the people nearby mentioned wanting to pet him, while someone else talked about whether Dobermans were supposed to be scary or not. The first girl said he looked pretty cute, then leaned down, hoping she could pet him. He wasn't having any of it and deep down just wished they would back off already. Even though was clearly annoyed, the woman just went ahead and started petting him. She seemed pretty surprised by how soft his fur was, and someone else pointed out how much actually seemed to like the attention. Even though he was mad, couldn't help but wag his tail, which just made him feel even more embarrassed. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a bone-shaped treat. She told him it was actually for her puppy back at home, but she handed it over to him instead. After the women left, sat by himself. He stared at the treat on the table, not even tempted by it. To him, it looked like junk, nothing worth having. He figured he should at least try it, since the humans had given it to him as a gift. The second he tasted it, his eyes went wide. Looking like a Doberman, started racing around in circles. He was pumped, his energy almost crackling in the air, the kind of vibe that made it clear he was thinking about some wild, crazy fun, something he'd never experienced before. He called it the thrill of breaking things and letting loose. Off to the side, Jun stood with, both of them watching with confusion, not really sure what he was up to or why he seemed so hyped. Jun watched who had turned into a Doberman just chilling and chewing on a bone. Looking at being so into it, Jun felt a bit more at ease. He figured everything was fine, so he let keep doing his thing without stressing out about it. Later on, ended up knocked out cold on the restaurant table. Jun just shook his head, thinking about how always tries to keep up with everyone at the table even though he can't handle his drinks. Was totally out of it, not waking up anytime soon. Had Bongo slumped over his back, barely moving. Even though Bongo was out cold, kept an eye on him, thinking about what to do next. Up ahead, Jun was hauling and made it clear to not to do anything drastic. Instead, Jun told him to just take Bongo back home. As they walked along, realized that lady, Jun's sister, probably wouldn't be happy about what they were doing. Still, Jun made it clear that leaving the man on the street just wasn't an option. Bongo tossed and turned on his back, clearly stuck in a bad dream. Watched him for a second, thinking maybe it'd be easier to just let Bongo go for good. But then, Jun shot him a serious look and made it clear that wasn't an option. Jun gently put his hand on his forehead while he slept. He could tell needed proper help, not just rest. As he watched over him, Jun thought it wouldn't hurt to let relive some of his best memories. Suddenly recognized the magic being used. It hit him that this was the same dream magic the witches used, the kind that lets them mess with dreams however they want. He found it wild that humans usually couldn't pull it off, but his master actually managed to do it. Jun just shrugged it off, saying he only tweaked it a little. After that, Bongo finally started to chill out and fell asleep on his back. Jun watched him and couldn't help thinking about how rough Bongo's real life must have been. At least now, while he slept, maybe things felt a little better for him. In his dreams, suddenly realized he was a kid again. He looked around, confused and surprised, trying to figure out how he ended up like this. Everything felt strange and it didn't make much sense. Just then, Dad showed up and rested his hand on his head, stared at him, surprised and unsure if this was really his dad. Watched his dad smile at him, noticing how proud he seemed. Even though it felt good, couldn't help but remember how long his dad had actually been away. The moment was a little heavy for him, as he realized just how much time had passed since things were normal. The dad let his son know that if he left, the kid would have to step up and look after the family. The boy wondered why his dad couldn't just stay with them, but the dad turned it around, wanting to see if his son was ready to look out for his mom and sister. His dad let him know he was really depending on him and apologized before leaving. That hit hard. Tears started running down his face, and he just broke down, not wanting his dad to leave. It was too much for him to handle, and he just couldn't hold back how much he didn't want to be left alone. He kept crying, thinking about all the times he complained about leaving the bath early, getting bored while fishing, or asking to be carried up the mountain. Now, he wished he hadn't made such a fuss about those things. Out of nowhere, his mom's voice echoed through the house, letting him know dinner was on the table. The scene switched to a family barbecue. The dad handed the mom a beer and she watched over the grill, saying the food was going to taste great. The dad looked around and really liked how things felt. He thought they should hang out like this more often. The mom noticed how happy the kids looked and felt the same way. She called out to her son, wanting him to come over and be with them. Stared at his family, eyes watering up. He could barely get his parents' names out, voice small and shaky. His mom noticed something was off and wondered if maybe he didn't want the curry rice in front of him, even though it was usually his favorite. He started tearing up, completely caught off guard by how good the food tasted. He glanced over at his dad, who had in his arms, and then at his mom. Even without saying anything, he felt close to them, hoping they could sense how much he cared. The scene shifted, showing Bongo as an adult, sitting alone in his dream. He looked serious, clearly set on making sure everyone around him could relax. In his mind, he promised himself he'd earn their trust, no matter what it took. He grinned to himself, thinking he was finally the man of the house now, ready to handle whatever came his way. He glanced at an old memory of his family when everything used to be good. Deep down, he missed those days and hoped things could go back to how they were. Slowly opened his eyes that morning, his head still heavy from the night before. Jun's sister was already up and calling out to him. She let him know she'd made some hangover soup, probably guessing he'd need it after whatever happened last night. He woke up suddenly, heart pounding from the surprise. In the background was tossing around the idea of just letting him sleep for good, acting like that's what he wanted anyway. But Jun didn't get why was so hung up on getting rid of the guy. Instead, Jun said to wait until everyone was up so they could eat together. Called out to Bongo again, making him sit up. He looked pretty confused, still trying to find the right words. After a little while, he managed to stand up, moving slow and unsteady. He held his head, mumbling about the pain pounding in his skull. Across the room, Jun sat on the floor with his daughter in his arms. He looked at her with a soft smile, checking in to see if she'd eaten and if the food was any good. His little girl nodded back, letting him know she already ate and liked it, her answer simple and honest like always. Stared at what was happening, totally confused and out of it. For a second, he honestly thought he might still be dreaming. He had no idea where he was until it finally hit him. He was in Jun's house. That's when another question popped into his head. Who was that kid he was looking at? Jun gently held his daughter, Saul, in his arms and started playing peekaboo with her. He couldn't help but think about who she might take after to be this adorable. Saul burst into giggles, reaching out for her dad, her face lighting up every time she saw him. Jun watched her and couldn't help but feel proud. He thought she was really smart, and seeing how great she was reminded him of her dad. Jun glanced over and saw slowly waking up on the floor. He wondered if had caught what just happened. Looked a bit lost, but after a second realized he really had seen it all. Jun felt his nerves getting. He wanted to know exactly how much had seen and what he'd noticed. Still shaking a bit, explained that he started paying attention when the kid called her dad Princess. He kept watching right up until the point when someone said the girl looked like her father. Jun's expression turned serious as he quickly reached out to cover his daughter's eyes, not wanting her to see what was happening. In his mind, he was already thinking about how he'd need to handle so he wouldn't talk, already regretting the situation he was in. Froze up, completely caught off guard, and for a second he actually thought Jun meant it. Then it hit him that Jun was just embarrassed and trying to hide it. Bongo slid under his pillow, shaking a bit. He couldn't wrap his head around what Jun just said. Even if it was meant as a joke, it sounded way too real. The thought stuck with him, making him uneasy. That's when he caught a whiff of himself and realized he smelled strongly of alcohol. Pushed open the door, letting in the first light of the morning. He pointed out that the sun was already up and Jun had just rolled out of bed. Looked over, his nerves settling a bit, just glad he'd made it through the night. Gave a soft smile, looking calm and kind, almost like she was too good to be true. She seemed to know he was having a rough time, so she let him know she'd made hangover soup and asked if he wanted to join her. Felt grateful, deep down, that she'd stepped in and helped him out right when things were getting too much for him. At breakfast, called by the wrong name, thinking he was someone else. Quietly let her know his real name. Looked a bit embarrassed and said sorry, but just brushed it off, letting her know it was no big deal. Saw this as his shot to finally turn things around and shake off his reputation for being a washed-up drunk. Trying to play it cool, He started hyping up cooking, making it sound like she was seriously talented in the kitchen. He kept glancing over at Jun, pretty much making it obvious who he was talking about, almost like he was giving him a shout-out for having it so good. Jun suddenly cut him off and set things straight, letting everyone know that wasn't his wife. She was actually his real sister. He wrapped things up like it was no big deal and told everyone it was time to eat. Bongo stood there, kind of embarrassed, stumbling over his response. He really wished he hadn't said anything earlier and thought it would been way better to just stay quiet. Turned her attention to and started talking about how Jun had said they were basically like brothers. Didn't see that coming at first. He paused for a second, taking it in. Then, he caught on to what was getting at and decided to play along with her. Felt a little bad for asking out of the blue, but she still wanted him to look after Jun for a bit. She hoped he wouldn't mind and tried to keep it casual, not wanting to make things awkward. Froze, his spoon slipping from his hand as he tried to process what he just heard. The idea of being put in charge of someone like Jun didn't seem real. Memories of Jun came rushing back. This was the same guy who had taken down an entire A-rank hunter team without even breaking a sweat. He'd managed to handle a boss-level demon like it was nothing, almost like dealing with a regular pet. He sat there, thinking about what it actually meant to look after someone like Jun. Meanwhile, Jun just kept eating his food in silence right next to him. Told everyone that Jun had actually been stuck inside a gate and only made it back to the real world a few weeks ago. Froze for a second, the news stories about people coming back from the gates running through his mind. It hit him that her brother was actually one of those survivors he'd seen mentioned online. He also remembered hearing about those top hunters coming back from overseas with strange powers they picked up inside the gates. Started thinking if Jun was like the others, maybe trapped there too. While was lost in thought, Jun kept eating and told him he wasn't stuck like people said. Didn't seem too interested and just mentioned something about Jun being some king of a continent or whatever. His eyes went wide when it hit him. They were actually talking about a real king. Pictured Jun as some kind of legendary emperor, the type you see in history books or on TV. Jun was telling his sister that he wasn't just any old king. He was the top guy, the emperor. Just shrugged, not really seeing any big difference between the titles. But Jun pushed back, saying the gap was huge, so big that even kings wouldn't meet his eyes. Sat there, still processing what he heard, replaying in his head that he really was an emperor. Jumped into the conversation and brought up the old king of, asking Jun if he remembered him. Jun looked confused and didn't seem to know who was talking about. Watching this, started to think that there was more to than he first thought. Brought up the story of the guy who got his head chopped off for staring the emperor down and starting a rebellion. Jun didn't think much of it, just brushing it off like it was no big deal. That reaction caught off guard, leaving him speechless for a second. Looked over at and let him know that what Jun was dealing with was probably just something that happens after going through tough times. He said Jun would need some time to get back to normal life. Nodded, realizing things were finally clicking into place for him. His eyes widened with excitement as it hit him. Jun probably had all that respect and authority because he used to be an emperor. Curious, turned to and wondered if held a role like a prime minister back then. Simply explained that during that era he was actually a strategist. Watched and tried to figure out if he really meant what he said, or if he was just saying it to fit in with everyone else. Then turned to and asked him to help Jun get used to things again, hoping he could make the transition back to everyday life a bit smoother for him. Nodded right away, looking pumped and ready to go all in. Gave him a grateful look, clearly glad to have his help. She looked over at and brought up the idea of getting a part-time job. Just stared at her, not really understanding what she meant. He'd never really heard about jobs like that before, so the whole thing seemed kind of strange to him. Lets everyone know that the grocery store across from their place needs someone to help out. Lady mentions that she brought up's name, and the owner suggested he should come in for an interview. Is really thankful to Lady, but he explains he has an important job. He needs to stay close to his master at all times. Before the conversation can go any further, Jun cuts in and shuts it down. Jun just tells to take the job, saying it's annoying to have him tagging along all the time. In his head, he figures this grocery store gig will help get used to how things work on Earth, especially after all the weird stuff has done before. Even though the pay isn't great, Jun knows they could use the extra cash. Pushes back, not letting his master forget what he promised about building a legendary empire on Earth. Jun nods, remembering the promise he made. He knows he can't just jump in and get it done, though. To actually pull it off, he needs to really get how things work in this world and what people here go through every day. He makes it clear he's not telling the guy to ditch his job as a strategist. Instead, he's putting his trust in him and handing over everything that has to do with starting their new nation. Catches on that his master is actually seeing how loyal he is. Without hesitating, drops to his knees and bows down, showing just how serious he is about proving himself. He got down on his knees, desperate for his master to end things for him right then and there. Jun watched, clearly irritated by the whole scene and just wanted the guy to chill out. Kept talking, looking pretty serious as he admitted he never really got what his master wanted. He seemed pretty down about it, almost embarrassed, like he didn't even deserve to look at his master. Meanwhile, Jun just shrugged it off, not looking too bothered by the whole thing. Made up his mind to go all in on the investigation, like he wouldn't stop until he was totally worn out. Jun let know that was heading out for the interview, and she gave a quick nod, showing she understood. The scene wraps up with dropping to his knees, head low. The caption explains that, also known as the old man, has made up his mind to go after a job and take on a new chapter in his life. Later on, was in the kitchen, washing dishes by himself. Noticed this and mentioned it to Jun. She pointed out that even though was their guest, Jun still let him handle the dishes, which caught her off guard. Jun let everyone know that he pushed to handle things himself. He told her to take it easy for a bit. Couldn't help but question if all of this was okay. Jun mentioned how was actually not bad at washing dishes, which caught off guard. As she settled in, turned her attention to the TV, where the news was on. She started thinking about what they were saying, if more people gathering in one place actually made Gates show up more often. On the news, the anchor talks about how Gates have been popping up a lot in Seoul and around the area lately. The expert backs it up, saying people living in these city areas always have to stay ready for anything. Whenever a new gate shows up, it just pulls in everything alive within a couple kilometers, so everyone's always on edge, waiting for the next one to pop up. An expert on TV mentioned that most people in the academic world think there's a good chance a gate could show up somewhere south of the Han River, close to Seoul. They're already working on plans to deal with it. Suddenly tenses up when she hears this, because her family lives in, right where they're talking about. She starts to worry about what would happen if a gate actually opened up near their home. Jun tries to calm her down, acting like everything's under control. Just then, the kid's spirit rushes over to him, reaching out for her dad. Soul spots who's turned into a tiny chihuahua and doesn't even hesitate. He rushes right over, scoops the little dog up and squeezes him in a big hug. He looks like he's about to plant a kiss on, totally caught up in the moment. Jun steps in, his voice serious, making sure his daughter doesn't go any further. He tells her the dog is filthy and gross, thinking she could get sick if she kisses it. In his head, he pictures himself going after, mad at the risk the dog brings. Saul stares at her dad, not really sure what to think or if she's actually in danger. Meanwhile, is scared out of his mind, trying to figure out why someone's coming after him when he hasn't even done anything wrong. Smack Jun on the back, annoyed that he was messing with animals right in front of his kid. Jun just stood there, not really getting what he did wrong. Jun shot an annoyed look, not sure if he should actually treat him like some kind of animal. But then it hit him. This kid really did see him like that. So with a sigh, Jun just rolled with it. Saul figures he'll just go ahead and give the dog a few pats, so he reaches out and starts petting him. Jun stands there, quietly checking out the scene in front of him. He takes it all in, kind of impressed by how cool everything looks. And good looks. Watches as Jun turns to his daughter, who's calling out to him with that usual affection. Every time he sees her, something in him softens, and he can't help but feel a gentle warmth in his chest. He holds her close, thinking about how rough and risky this world really is. It hits him that she shouldn't have to deal with all of this. He knows deep down he's not trying to be some hero. Still, he wants to do something, just enough to make this world a bit better. The next day, Jun hands an envelope. It probably has some cash inside, and he wants her to use it to help out. Tore open the envelope Jun handed her and glanced inside, curiosity all over her face. She wanted to know how much was in there, and Jun told her it was 5 million won. Stared at the cash, clearly caught off guard, and wondered where he managed to get so much money out of nowhere. Jun said he looked at his bank account just to see what was in there. He was surprised to see 5 million won sitting in his savings. He figured this must be the money he'd slowly put away before he vanished. The bank book clearly showed the balance, almost like a quiet reminder of his old life. Started tearing up, really grateful for what Jun had done for her. She admitted she hadn't told him anything before because she didn't want him to stress about her problems. Lately, things had been rough. She'd been falling behind on bills, rent was piling up, and even buying food was getting hard. Wiped her eyes and managed a small smile, grateful for the help. She felt like she could finally relax a bit, knowing Jun had her back. Jun looked at her, wanting to make sure she was really okay. Seeing her smile, he felt good about what he'd done, surprised that just giving a little help could make such a difference for someone. Told him she'd make dinner and asked if he had any cravings. He just shrugged it off and said he was good with whatever she decided to cook. Noticed how straightforward Jun was. She brought up the idea of heading to the mart together for groceries and mentioned they could grab some food along the way. She even suggested taking Seoul to a kid's cafe or the playground. But Jun turned her down in a calm way, saying he just wanted to stay home and take it easy since he really needed a break. Jun figured that if everyone headed to the mark as a group, Lord might actually appreciate it. Plus, with the Lord around, and Saul would be a lot safer if something went wrong. Hearing that, decided she'd just stick with the old man for now. Jun decided he'd head out and just told him to take it easy and do whatever he wanted. As watched him go, a small smile crept onto his face. Right then, everything felt just right. Jun couldn't stop thinking about where he was headed. He was pumped, knowing he was finally going to check out the spot he'd always wanted to visit visit ever since he first saw it. When he got to the campus comic cafe, he started wondering if a new volume of Hunter x Hunter had come out while he was gone. It had been forever since he last read it, and he couldn't help but think that, after all this time, he might finally get to catch up on the story. At the big supermarket, got excited when he spotted another free food sample. He hurried over to Lady, who was pushing a shopping cart with Saul sitting inside. Couldn't wait to let her know about his find. He couldn't believe there was a spot where you could just eat as much as you wanted without spending a cent. To him, the free sample corner felt like the best thing ever. Almost too good to be real, like he'd just leveled up in real life. Watched a little embarrassed while handed Saul some food to try. Saul looked pretty happy with it, clearly enjoying the taste. Started singing, clearly in a good mood, about how awesome it was to try all the free samples at the mart. Saul, picking up on's vibe, joined in and echoed what he said, both of them having fun and not caring who was watching. Kept singing and messing around with Saul while they rolled through the store in a shopping cart. He kept saying how nice it was that the whole family was hanging out together at the sample corner. Every now and then, he'd hand Saul a bite of food, grinning the whole time. He kept singing about the free food in that corner, and just sighed, watching them get closer to the dumpling sample counter. She went up to the counter and ordered a bag of dumplings from the worker. Out of nowhere, an announcement blasted through the store speakers about a huge gate showing up near Crossroads Station. Right away, the shoppers lost it and started rushing around, trying to get out as fast as they could. Around that time, over at the comic cafe, Jun was hanging out when he overheard a couple of girls talking about whether the latest Hunter x Hunter chapter had dropped yet. Jun couldn't believe it still hadn't happened. From somewhere nearby, he caught a guy joking about how, back when he joined the army 3 years ago, he thought it would be out before he finished his service. Hearing that, Jun just felt let down. He could feel anger start to bubble up as he realized that after all this time, nothing had come out yet. Hearing the young guy mention 3 whole years made it sting even more. Frustration weighed on him, and he muttered under his breath, thinking how it felt like he'd been waiting for centuries. The young guy could tell something was up just by looking at him. Instead of digging into it, he quickly switched gears, eager to distract him. He started talking about this new series that had blown up lately, so popular that they even dropped a special limited edition. Jun glanced at the guy handed him. The cover had big letters, the weakest, SSS rank Hunter. He almost laughed. The whole thing just reminded him of one of stories, something over the top and hard to believe. While flipping through the pages, he realized the main character was just as weak as Bongo and had a tough home life too. He figured the story was probably about getting stronger, so it didn't actually seem so bad after all. He paused when he reached the fight scene, surprised to see the Ninth Circle Necromancer go down without much of a struggle. He hadn't pictured that happening, and started to wonder how things were playing out this way. He folded his arms, annoyed. The hero started out just as weak as Bongo, but there was no way someone like that could ever take down a necromancer that's strong with those moves. Jun snapped the book shut, already regretting he didn't just go to the supermarket like he'd planned. Sitting there felt pointless, and now he was just more tired than before. He tried to remember the last time he actually got a decent night's sleep, but nothing came to mind. He started getting really sleepy and realized he'd been pretty worn out these days. Figuring it was finally time to crash, he headed to bed. Still, he couldn't help but feel a bit down, knowing that the nightmare curse was still hanging over him. He really wanted the succubus queen to be around. Maybe then his nightmares wouldn't bother him so much. He stretched out on his bed and shut his eyes, his mind drifting to his followers. He couldn't help but think about whether they were doing all right. Inside the supermarket shelter, an announcement kept playing, telling everyone about a huge gate showing up near Crossroads Station. The message told people to get to the basement shelter right away. Everyone started talking about Crossroads, looking uneasy. One woman looked especially tense, worried about her friend who lived near the station. Held Saul close, her mind racing with thoughts about Jun. She couldn't help but picture him sitting by himself at home, and the worry kept nagging at her. Noticed how tense she looked and tried to calm her down. He spoke quietly, meaning well, letting her know that even if he sounded a bit nosy, his master would be all right, and she didn't have to stress about it. Couldn't help but doubt if what he just heard was real. Staying calm, just smiled and explained that his master was basically untouchable now. Normal weapons couldn't even leave a mark on him. Looked like he didn't expect what he just heard. Nodded, saying it really was something amazing. He explained that for a long time, tons of scientists had tried to help his master finally get some peace, but no one had ever pulled it off. Thought back to the day when the emperor told his people to find a way for him to finally rest forever. He thought back to when the scientists came up with all sorts of ideas. The very first try was when his master actually jumped from the top of the world tree, way out at the world's edge. Instead of making any real progress, all that happened was the roots below broke apart. He remembered how his master once jumped straight into the flames of what everyone called hell. The guy stayed there for a whole month, completely fine, and when he finally came out, he just seemed annoyed that it had been so boring. He suddenly remembered he'd swallowed a poison that could take down a giant in just one drop. But instead of dropping dead, his body actually felt stronger, like he'd just leveled up. Wrapped up what he was saying with a laugh, pointing out how his master always comes back, no matter what happens. It made him wonder if his master was actually immortal. Rolled her eyes a bit, not really buying into this idea, but she tried to reassure herself anyway. She kept thinking that since place was nowhere near crossroads, he should be safe. Nodded along, saying there's nothing to stress about as long as he stays home. His mind flashed back to an earlier chat with Jun. Jun had mentioned he was planning to sneak out later. He'd also told that if his sister came looking, should cover for him and say he was at home. On top of that, Jun had teased him, saying there be consequences if spilled the beans. Remembering that, started to get nervous, convincing himself that Jun was definitely home and safe. Somewhere else, a woman caught the news about the gate getting labeled as a disaster rank. Around her, a few people tried to figure out what that actually meant, looking a little confused. Someone in the group pointed out that disaster rank is actually the top threat level, even higher than danger or catastrophe. Hearing this, everyone started to understand just how bad things were. Someone else mentioned that the office had already sent a bunch of hunters to try and handle it, and a few people around the room quietly hoped things wouldn't get any worse. She told him that a disaster-level gate was powerful enough to destroy a whole country. It reminded him of what happened 3 years back, when a massive dragon showed up and tore through a city, leaving nothing but chaos behind. Inside the shelter, held the frightened soul close, doing her best to help her feel safe. Even though she kept telling the girl things would turn out all right, was struggling to keep her own nerves in check. She tried to look calm on the outside, but deep down, she was just as anxious. Jun woke up flat on his back in a place he'd never seen before, with snow all around him. The cold bit through his clothes, making him shiver. He just stared at the white sky, confused, trying to figure out if he was even awake. Everything felt off, like the kind of dream that makes you want to wake up, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all way too real. Out of nowhere, a blue system window popped up right in front of him, letting him know he just stepped into something called the Sanctuary, a dimensional gate. He suddenly noticed he was actually inside a gate, and started to wonder if it had opened somewhere near the manga cafe. It caught him off guard, and his mind raced, trying to figure out how he ended up there. He thought about his sister and his daughter, trying to calm himself down. Was with them, so he figured they'd be okay. He stretched his arms, not really able to sit still. The thought hit him that maybe this whole thing could actually work out for him. If things went this way, he might even skip paying for the gate entrance. He smiled to himself, thinking about how good things usually show up when you're not even looking for them. He thought to himself that from now on, he could have as much fun as he wanted, while the system kept talking about a new gate showing up. 3 hours slipped by before anyone even noticed. Somewhere else inside the same gate, and his crew were in the middle of a wild fight, with chaos breaking out all around them. Complained under his breath about how wild things were getting. Glancing over at Hun, the S-rank hunter everyone called Swift Sword, was caught up in a tough fight with a massive ice monster swinging a huge axe. Couldn't help but stare, surprised that this monster was actually keeping up with a hunter as strong as Hun. The ice monster let out a loud roar. Bongo couldn't help but roll his eyes, kind of impressed but also a little annoyed at how S-rank hunters did things. You could see the toll the fight had taken on everyone, faces tired, clothes torn, some of them barely standing. One of the women looked around, realizing they all would have been done for if the S-rank hunter hadn't been there. Some people started looking around, trying to figure out how many of them were still alive after everything that just happened. Just stood there, head down, feeling useless, thinking there was no way someone like him could make a difference in a battle like this. Hoon finally took down the ice monster. He looked completely worn out, barely holding himself up with his sword. Even with all that effort, he could see tons of monsters still out there, just waiting for their next move. Grew more nervous as he thought about whether they'd be able to take on the boss of this gate, especially now that everyone was totally wiped out. Couldn't stop thinking about what might happen if they messed up. The memory of what went down 3 years ago still stuck with him. A disaster he never really got over. The thought of going through something like that again made his stomach twist. Out of nowhere, every ice giant monster still standing just dropped to the ground at the same time. Froze for a second, staring at the fallen monsters. He couldn't figure out how they all went down together, and the whole thing left him wondering what just happened. Right after that, a system window popped up, letting everyone know that the boss monster was about to show up. It said the guardian of the sanctuary, the frost giant, had arrived. Saw the warning and quickly let his teammates know the boss was on its way. A massive stood among the hunters who had already fallen. His thick white beard and sharp icy horns made him stand out right away. He let everyone know he was the guardian of, and carried messages from the god that all the followed. He walked over, looking pretty mad. Before dealing with the people who had broken into their hideout, he made it clear he had just one question for them. He suddenly let out this heavy pressure that made the rest of the hunters drop to their knees. Everyone could tell he meant business as he looked around, wanting to know where someone named XXX was hiding. He suddenly went after one of the hunters, Hun, who was just trying to stand up. As he did, he kept bringing up the same question about someone named 30, the person who'd come into the sanctuary with them. The hunters glanced around at each other, completely lost and unsure about what he meant. None of them could figure out what was going on, and the confusion showed on their faces. Launched a powerful blast of ice across the area, making the whole place freeze up for a second. He was clearly fed up with whoever was hiding, calling them out and daring them to come out and face him instead of staying out of sight. He made it clear, just like Triple X had in the past, that he was ready to wipe out every last one of them. Bongo and the others just stood there, frozen. They saw Hoon go down after just one hit. That's when it really hit them. There was no way out of this. Everything suddenly felt impossible. Kept his eyes fixed on the giant. Deep down, he knew he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He thought about his mom and his sister. It felt like he'd finally started to see a bit of hope just when his family popped into his head. He sprinted straight for, pushing himself as hard as he could. He didn't care about anything else in that moment. He just knew he couldn't let things end here. Blocked his attack without breaking a sweat and tossed him aside. Bongo hit the ground hard and lay there, holding his side and groaning. The giant lifted his hand high, staring down with a cold, serious look. He made it clear that no mortal with too much pride could get past the guardian of Niflheim. Bongo's mind raced as he realized this wasn't the place he wanted things to end. Changed all of a sudden, growing bigger and way scarier. It was obvious he'd been waiting for this moment, finally facing off against the person he'd been looking for. Right then, a whole bunch of giant undead monsters showed up behind him. Their eyes had this weird dark purple glow, making the whole scene even creepier. Froze for a second and took a few steps back. He couldn't wrap his head around what he was looking at. He kept staring, trying to figure out if these creatures in front of him were actually monsters. He was still a little out of it when he picked up on someone calling his name. The voice rang out over and over, and it was one he definitely recognized. He stared, trying to figure out if the person in front of him was actually. He glanced up and spotted Jun just chilling on top of one of those huge zombie monsters, looking like it was no big deal. He couldn't help but freeze, caught off guard, and trying to figure out what Jun was even doing there. Jun just smiled, keeping things chill like it was no big deal how everything happened. Seeing him like that, relaxed. He was honestly glad they ran into each other again. He froze, caught off guard, as he started to wonder if Jun had really taken down all those monsters by himself. Right then, couldn't help but yell out, startled by what was happening. He tried to get the attention of the monsters behind him, but those undead creatures just glared at him, looking like they wanted him gone. Jun noticed right away that everyone was staring at their clan leader with serious, almost angry eyes. He couldn't figure out why they looked at him like that, but he could tell something was definitely off. It was like the whole room was tense, and Jun tried to understand what was going on. Lost his temper fast. He started claiming he was the god over all and that he spoke for the giant with the sewn lips. In his mind, it just didn't make sense that anyone would even think about challenging him. Finally put the pieces together and saw that had been looking for Jun the whole time. When called out Jun for copying Triple X's moves, just froze, not sure how to react. It was a lot to take in, and he stood there, trying to process everything that had just happened. Kept yelling at Jun, blaming him for using black magic, and saying it was the reason his people couldn't rest in peace. Could feel the heavy atmosphere coming from, and stood there, frozen, as he realized just how much damage could really do. His face twisted with anger as he shouted out, making it clear he wasn't going to let Triple X or King June off the hook anytime soon. There was no way he'd ever forgive them for what they did. Panicked, his voice shaking as he tried to get June to run. He remembered what happened before. This monster took down a top-ranked hunter like it was nothing. Knew things were serious, and the fear in his eyes said it all. He just wanted June to get out before it was too late. Jun just stands there, not bothered by the snow swirling all around him. He actually likes it and doesn't see any reason to leave when he could just stay and enjoy the moment. On the other hand, can't believe what he's seeing. Jun strolls toward, looking calm and sure of himself. He moves past his army of huge undead giants, the ones he brought to life earlier. The giants stand there, silent and towering, making the whole scene feel tense. Looks at Jun, clearly not expecting him to recognize him. Jun doesn't really like being called out like that, but he's actually more surprised that even knows who he is. Jun spots the title, Triple X, and that's all he needs to figure out who the giant really is. Nods to himself, recognizing Jun right away. He can't help but be surprised that anyone wouldn't know who Jun is. He lets it slip that the god every monster looks up to, even that huge one with its mouth sewn shut, is keeping an eye on him. Bongo stands there, his whole body shaking as he watches what's happening. Even Even though he knows it's Jun in front of him, he can't help but see him as something way beyond normal, almost like he's looking at a god. Isn't finished yet. He points out that there's more going on. Every divine realm has their eyes on him now. After all, he's the one who picked up the title of Triple X. Jun thinks back, trying to remember when all of this even began. Jun remembers all the times he's seen these so-called unbeatable guys and self-proclaimed kings act tough, only to get knocked down by him in just a few hits. None of them ever lasted long. He'd been living so long it basically felt never-ending, and honestly, he was just tired of it. So, over and over, he found himself hoping there was some kind of god out there listening to him. Jun walked up to with a smirk, clearly trying to get under his skin. He threw out a challenge, acting like there was no way anyone, even a god, could beat him. Snapped, raising his voice and telling Jun to watch his words, especially since they were in front of the messenger of the giant with the sewn lips. You could see the tension rising between them, like things could blow up any second. Jun barely reacts, just shrugging off the whole thing. He lets his god know that if they ever cross paths, things won't end well for him. Jun lifts his hand, and this huge surge of dark purple energy starts forming around him. He lets the energy loose, and it rushes straight at the army of undead giants, swallowing them up. Stared, his eyes wide, trying to figure out what he was even looking at. Confused and a little freaked out, he tried to make sense of the situation, but nothing added up. Stands frozen, eyes wide as he stares at what's happening in front of him. His stomach drops, and for a second he can't even move. It's like time slows down and he just stands there, taking it all in, not sure what to do next. The undead giants started pulling themselves together, their bodies fixing up and joining into one massive creature. It looked like a nightmare, pieced together from all kinds of parts, and just kept getting bigger and scarier by the second. Jun stood in front of the strange new creature, glancing over at. He wanted to know if still believed his god could beat him now. The tension between them was obvious, and everyone could sense Jun's confidence. Just stood there, totally thrown off, trying to wrap his head around how anyone could have that kind of power. Jun wasn't backing down, pushing him again with the same question, basically daring him to believe that his so-called god could win. Couldn't take it. He let out a scream, pain written all over his face. The patchwork golem swings hard and lands a heavy punch right on, and another hunter stood back, keeping an eye on what was happening from afar. The other guy wondered if the person was actually dead, but didn't like hearing that kind of talk. He believed saying stuff like that could jinx things. As he watched, realized this whole situation looked really familiar. It reminded him of the time Jun used that spell to bring someone back to life. He was sure Jun was using the resurrection spell again. The patchwork golem doesn't let up, pounding on again and again. Tries to block the blows, but the golem's hits just keep coming, each one heavier than the last. It's getting harder for it to stay on his feet as the golem keeps swinging, not giving him a chance to catch his breath. Jun poked at it and thought it kind of felt like slime. Was caught off guard by that and echoed the thought, surprised. Jun figured by now the whole thing had probably turned into mush. Jun mentions how this kind of thing is usually used for little kids, helping them learn and get creative. He just took the same idea and tried it out here. He talks about how it works. First, all the ingredients get mixed together until they're even. Then, he uses magic to stir things up and make the mix thicken a little. Finally, he shapes it however he wants. He pressed down on it with both hands, working it the way you'd need bread. Jun stood in front of the giant patchwork golem, staring at the mess it had made. He turned to, wanting to know what he thought. Jun explained that he'd built this thing after seeing a similar creature before. Just stared, totally caught off guard by the whole situation. Jun stood next to, who still looked like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Jun turned to, wanting to know what he thought, hesitated a little unsure and said it looked kind of old school. Before could say more, Jun jumped in, clearly pumped, and told he really knew his stuff. Jun went on about how the style wasn't really Renaissance or Baroque, but something totally modern with a bit of Scandinavian vibe. He even joked around, asking if had studied art or something. Jun glanced over at what was left of the looking pretty unimpressed. After hearing all that talk, it was clear the monster wasn't as tough as it made itself out to be. Most of the weak ones just talked big anyway. Stood there, honestly stunned that Jun had taken down something that scary without breaking a sweat. Jun barely reacts, acting like he wouldn't have stood a chance after a couple of hits anyway. The patchwork golem starts falling apart, breaking down into streams of purple energy. Watches, surprised, realizing that Jun really is on another level. Can't help but believe the Emperor is on a whole other level. He figures that only someone really special could wipe everything out so easily, just by moving his hand. Out of nowhere, a bright system window popped up in front of Jun. It said he'd leveled up, and a bunch of other notifications followed right after. The messages told him he'd just taken down the guardian of the sanctuary, the frost giant. Another window let him know the tribe's gate sanctuary was about to vanish in an hour. More systems custom windows popped up on the screen. He just unlocked a new rank, one that even the giants were scared of. His patron god, the giant with lips sewn shut, was seriously ticked off at him now. It wasn't just that god either. All the gods from the Asgard constellation looked at him with the same anger. Even so, whatever he was becoming, it was only getting stronger. Jun glanced at the windows popping up in front of him. He figured if there was an issue, they'd show up and deal with him directly anyway. Just as he was thinking that, another window appeared out of nowhere. This one was different, it said. His bound follower could finally be summoned. The window on the screen let Jun know that he could now call on his follower. Jun's eyes got wide when he realized this, almost like he couldn't believe it. The thought of actually being able to summon started to sink in. Jun reaches out his hand. He reaches out to the Queen of the, hoping she'll respond. As he does, a glowing purple summoning circle lights up in front of him. A girl with wings stepped out of the circle, catching everyone off guard. Wide-eyed and confused turned to Jun, trying to figure out what was happening. The woman who just appeared lowers her head, looking a bit unsure, like she's trying to figure out if the guy in front of her is really the one she's supposed to follow. She starts to question if he's actually the one in charge of her. Spots her and can't help but stare. He instantly knows who she is and notices how pretty she looks. Jun, curious, wants to know how she's been lately. Runs over to Jun and wraps her arms around him, holding on tight. Tears stream down her face as she clings to him, showing just how much she cares. For her, Jun means everything, and in that moment she just needs to be close to him. She looks at him, clearly confused, trying to figure out how this could even be possible. For years, actually decades, she just assumed he was gone for good. Jun nodded, remembering he'd thought the same thing before everything got complicated. Looks at Jun, clearly worried. She notices something's off. His eyes don't have their usual shine, and his lips look a bit dull. She's not sure if he's okay, so she checks in on him. There's a quick note in the corner that the way she's talking about his eyes and lips sounds old-fashioned. Jun just shrugs it off and says he's alright. He tells her to move back a bit, and Arrow quickly does what he says, looking a little embarrassed as she says sorry. Got down on one knee, doing the whole respectful thing like he was supposed to. He introduced himself as the minister of the imperial household, greeting his boss. But Jun didn't really care for all that fancy stuff and told to relax, wanting to know how everything was going. Explained that after he and the Archduke passed away, nothing really changed. Everyone just kept doing their jobs like before. He mentioned that, who used to be in charge of the military stuff, was now running things for him. Jun looked around and saw that everyone was okay. He told her to get up. As he watched, he started thinking about showing up on Earth with him. With all that in mind, it seemed clear to Jun that really was the best choice for the Emperor's throne. Catches herself and says sorry for being rude, then wants to know more about the Archduke who decided to go through with this old tradition where servants are buried alive with their dead ruler. Jun wonders if she's talking about, but tells her that just went grocery shopping with his sister. Doesn't really get it and looks a little lost, hoping for a better explanation. Jun just brushed it off, acting like everything was cool and didn't need to stress. He was ready to move on and talk about the rest while they headed back. Was okay with that and went along with him. Jun looked over at, grinning, proud to have him by his side. He let know he was the only one he trusted to learn from him. Felt a bit tense, his mind racing as he tried to find the right words to say back. Jun explains that he slipped out without anyone knowing, so he needs to get back before his sister shows up. He asks to handle the mess and gets ready to take off, counting down with a grin on his face. But before Jun can finish, suddenly freaks out and tries to stop him. Jun and vanish, leaving nothing but a quick sparkle in the air. Now, he's left by himself, surrounded by ice and wreckage. He glances around at the mess, thinking about how he managed to fix things before, but this time he's not so sure if he can pull it off again. Near station, cops had already set up barriers around the spot where the gate showed up. Bureau Chief Du, who looked like he held a lot of authority, wanted to check out the list of hunters picked for the first raid team. His assistant nodded and got ready to show him the info. Du, the bureau chief, stood near station at the police court. He wanted to know how many people were there, so he turned to his assistant. The assistant let him know that 20 hunters had already been sent out. The chief wanted to know if there was anyone important in the group besides Hunter. The assistant explained that, aside from the team, was just a typical A-rank raid squad. He mentioned a few well-known names, like Sung Ha, and the chief listened and seemed to be thinking things over quietly. The assistant mentioned that they'd sent a rookie with the first raid team, a C-rank guy who actually had some promise. The chief seemed caught off guard hearing he was only C-rank. The assistant went on, explaining that this rookie was the same one who'd recently taken down an A-rank killer from the Anti-Bureau of Management Union at the Digital Complex station gate. The chief stands there trying to remember that boy. He knows he's seen him before, but the kid's name just isn't coming to him. The chief stared down, looking disappointed as he remembered how much potential the guy had. It was pretty obvious he regretted what happened. The assistant spoke up, reminding him that their team went in before anyone really knew how dangerous the gate was, so they didn't have the right gear or backup. The chief made it clear that because of the people who risked themselves to slow things down, they couldn't let anything else go wrong. No matter what, they had to stop any more trouble. The assistant nodded, ready to follow his lead. The chief stands in front of the glowing red gate, his eyes heavy with sadness. He wonders how much longer he has to stay here, just watching as more and more young people are lost. It's clear he's tired, really tired, of seeing this happen over and over again. Out of nowhere, the gate started getting smaller and flickering. The chief stared, trying to wrap his head around what was happening until it hit him. The gate was actually vanishing right in front of his eyes. The chief looks around, his mind racing as he tries to figure out if they really pulled it off. The gate vanishes, gone without a trace, and the street is left crowded with hunters, some collapsed and others hurt. People watching from the sidelines can't help but cheer, their faces lit up with excitement. They stare at the hunters, clearly impressed by what they just saw. They stood there, catching their breath, and let everyone know they were the ones who pulled it off. The disaster class gate was finally cleared. One of the assistants spots someone still awake over there. The chief and his team hurry over to, who looks completely wiped out. Glances over at them, his voice coming out weak and rough. The assistant nodded, letting the chief know they'd found the right guy. Bongo was getting noticed lately. People were calling him a C-rank rookie who was on the rise. He had a reputation, not just for his skills, but because everyone knew he was a son who cared a lot about his family. Hunter Bongo was starting to make a name for himself. A news update flashed on the TV, letting everyone know that the disaster class gate that showed up by station earlier, around 4 p.m., had been taken care of. The news kicked off by mentioning how Chief Du started his speech. He pointed out that everything turned out this way because the hunters put their lives on the line and gave up a lot for everyone's safety. People watching could tell it wasn't just about him. He wanted everyone to know how much the hunters had done for the country. At Jun's place, he heads into the kitchen and checks in with his sister about dinner. She's busy finishing things up, and he waits around, stomach rumbling, hoping food's ready soon. Jun shakes his head, not really interested in eating. He isn't hungry, and honestly, he's a little annoyed at being asked again. Says dinner's almost done and tells him to hang on, but Jun just sits there, clearly irritated. Jun sat on the floor with his daughter, Saul, messing around with a toy cash register. Saul was fired up, calling for her dad's attention and wanting to keep playing the same game. Jun looked pretty tired, but Saul was still full of energy and said she was having a good time. He couldn't help but wonder how much longer he'd have to keep this up. Saul glanced at her dad, trying to figure out if he was enjoying himself. Jun tried to play it cool and told her he was having fun, but anyone watching could tell he was forcing it. Jun stares at the Dr. Smarty Pants cash register toy sitting in front of him. Out of every toy out there, he can't figure out why she picked this one for him. In his mind, he lets out a silent scream, thinking about how much trouble this toy has brought to people. He can't help but wonder if the company that made it even knows how much of a headache it's been. Sol greets the customer with a bright, upbeat vibe, making the whole place feel a bit lighter. Jun, on the other hand, tries to act all serious, but anyone watching can tell he's just messing around. He steps up to the counter and points to the milk, letting the cashier know he wants just one carton. Saul let him know the price was 8,001. Jun looked at her, not really believing it was that much just for a single carton of milk. Saul, without missing a beat, said it again. The price was 8,000. Jun looked at his daughter with a serious face. He let her know he respected how good she was at spotting ways to make money, but he thought she was going a bit overboard with the price. He mentioned he'd hoped she might bring the cost of the milk down, even just a little. Sol gets fired up, acting stubborn as he insists the price is 8,000. Jun, realizing he can't win this one, pulls out some fake bills and hands over the 8,001. He gives a quick goodbye and heads out, not wanting to drag things out any longer. Sol grabs the cash with a grin and looks like he's ready to go for another round. Sat back, quietly watching as Jun kept saying the same word over and over. Jun started to lose track of time, realizing they'd been stuck in this cash register game for 3 hours. They just kept buying and returning stuff, doing the same thing again and again, and it was starting to feel pointless. Turn to, both of them watching what was happening. She looked unsettled, clearly thrown off by what she saw. Couldn't believe how intense the game was, how much patience and determination it demanded. She never thought something like this could even be real. Nods right away, showing she's totally on the same page as. She gets what he's feeling and backs him up without any hesitation. Points out that the really scary part is how the princess just keeps going when she finds something she likes. She doesn't quit, even if it means running herself into the ground. Watching her push herself like that, can't help but think she's a lot like her teacher. Still in his Doberman shape, watched the princess. He knew the Immortals' family was famous for being tough, and the princess fit right in. She never gave up and could be pretty ruthless ruthless. As he followed her around, he couldn't help but wonder if she even noticed how he had to keep up with her non-stop, playing this exhausting game day after day. It got to him sometimes, but he kept at it, knowing he didn't have much choice. Comes up with an idea for the game's name, calling it the Cash Register Game of the Ages. He looks to the others, waiting to see what they think about it. Seemed pretty impressed with the name and thought it fit perfectly. On the other hand, couldn't help but think to himself that actually had more talent for naming things than anyone would expect. Definitely not what people would guess just by looking at him. Then mentioned that you never really know when you might get caught up in a game like that yourself, so it's smart to always keep your guard up. Jun just stood there glaring at them. It seemed like he could hear every word, and instantly stopped moving, almost like someone had hit pause on them. From the kitchen, lets everyone know that dinner's set. Sol suddenly hopped off Jun's lap. She wasn't interested in food at all, and just wanted to keep playing, her energy still going strong. Watched his sister, not letting up on her about finishing her food. Sol just shook her head, dead set on playing instead of eating. Tried to get through to her, asking if she was really going to keep being so stubborn. Off to the side, Jun couldn't help but smile a little at the scene, quietly cheering his sister on in his own way. Quietly hints that if wants to play again, she can talk to her dad once she's done eating. King Jun freezes for a second, his mind racing as he tries to figure out what his sister really thinks about all this. He can't help but look over at her, searching for any clue about where she stands. After finishing her food, Sol looks up at her dad, hoping they can play together again. She's eager for more fun, not really thinking about anything else. Jun grabs his chest, wincing from the pain. He knows he can't keep going and gives up, letting the princess win this time. Sol grabbed her phone and called her dad. Jun, looking tired but kind of giving in, finally agreed to play another round with her, just after they had something to eat. Jun sat at the table with, and dinner looked like a big deal tonight. Plates packed with all kinds of food, way more than usual. The table was crowded with dishes, almost like they were celebrating something. Jun noticed just how much food was there, thinking it was probably enough to push the table to its limit. Everyone seemed ready to dig in, the kind of dinner that made you want to grab your phone for a quick pic before eating. Looks over at, curious about who she really is. Looked over at, wanting to get her permission before doing anything else. When she got the go-ahead, took a moment to introduce herself properly. She told everyone her name and mentioned that she worked as the minister of the imperial household, back when she served her master in the imperial palace. Nodded a little confused, but said she got it. She leaned over to Jun and quietly let him know she was pretty sure Errol was still really sick. Jun tries to calm her down, letting her know it's okay. Watches quietly, noticing that even though she looks all right on the outside, there's something off about the way she's acting. It's like her mind is somewhere else, not quite settled. She wanted to know how Even got in touch with June, and why she showed up at their house in the first place. Starts to talk, but June cuts her off and tells everyone they just ran into each other earlier that day. In his head, he's glad he came back before his sister and made sure changed out of her demon form. The thought of her real appearance shows up in his mind, and he's relieved he avoided any awkward questions. Looked at Jun, surprised to hear he'd been out that day. Jun explained he only went to the grocery store nearby, and it just kind of happened. Gets on his case, really laying into him about the mess that happened because of the disaster rank 8. She can't help but think about what she'd do if he ended up outside like that again, even if it was just around the corner. Jun lowers his head, taking the blame and admitting he messed up. Sat with his notebook open, jotting down everything that just happened. He wrote about Lady giving the king a hard time for sneaking out, and how the king kind of shrank back, looking embarrassed, almost like a kid who got caught. While was focused on his notes, Jun called out to him, his voice cutting through the moment, grabbing his attention right away. Jun shot a sharp look at while casually bending a spoon with his powers. He wanted to know Sage again, almost like he couldn't believe what he just heard. Answered, saying he was more than 1,200 years old. Jun just rolled his eyes, thinking had been around long enough to have seen it all. Gets a little awkward and clears his throat, obviously embarrassed. Steps in and puts a stop to whatever's going on. Wanted to know where was staying these days. Seemed unsure as she answered, which made look a bit worried. He started thinking maybe didn't have anywhere to go. Errol couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She still hadn't found a place to stay. Couldn't believe what he was seeing. There was this young woman, totally on her own in a world that wasn't exactly safe. He looked at her, surprised that someone like her would be out here alone. Thought it would be best if stayed with him for a while. Didn't feel right about it though. She couldn't see herself just crashing with the imperial family like it was no big deal, but then pointed out how rough and dangerous things could get if she tried to make it on her own. Didn't answer right away. She stopped to think about it, not sure what was really the right move. Turns to Miss, looking like she wants to say something important, but the words just won't come out right. She hesitates, stumbling over what she's trying to say. Miss notices and glances at her, a bit confused, waiting to hear what's up. Out of nowhere, raises his voice, saying it's what the emperor wants. Didn't waste a second. She dropped to her knees right away, showing everyone she was ready to follow the order without any argument. Stood there kind of lost, glancing down at. He told her to get up, not really sure what was going on. Nodded, saying she would. Meanwhile, tried to hide a laugh, thinking about the whole imperial order thing. It was tough to keep a straight face. Jun tried to get her to stop laughing, but couldn't help asking him why, even though he was clearly trying not to laugh himself. Jun pointed out that she was pretty good at laughing, which only made the situation funnier. Leaned over and told him to keep it down, hoping they wouldn't get caught. Quickly switched topics and wanted to know if she'd heard about the gate vanishing. At the same time, she mentioned how surprised she was when she found out a disaster rank gate had shown up. A news update pops up on the screen saying that 16 hunters lost their lives because of the disaster ranked gate that showed up earlier today. Out of the 6 people who made it out, only 1 is still awake. The other 5 are knocked out. Feels it's at least something that they managed to close the gate fast, but she can't help but feel sad for everyone who didn't make it. The news talks about how this is only the 2nd time a disaster-level gate has shown up in the country. They point out how important it is that, this time, the gate was stopped with hardly anyone getting hurt compared to last time. Sits there, thinking about how things could have gone way worse, like Seoul could have been completely destroyed, and a lot of people could have lost their lives. Jun stayed calm and told her everything would be alright. He promised he'd look out for her no matter what. She didn't need to stress, he was going to keep her and her soul safe. Sits in front of the TV watching the news. On the screen, stands in the middle of a crowd, reporters everywhere, microphones in his face. Thinks it's wild seeing up there actually making it onto the news like some big shot. He's clearly gaining attention these days. Jun, hanging out nearby, wonders if that's the same mister who dropped by their place not long ago. Can tell it's him right away, mostly because always acts clueless just like before. Found out that Mr. was actually a hunter, and Jun let her know it was true. She wondered why he hadn't mentioned it before. Jun points out that didn't actually ask him anything. Realizes this and admits he's right, looking a little embarrassed. Jun just brushes it off like it's no big deal. Then, out of nowhere, Saul lets everyone know she's done eating. She's all smiles, clearly wanting to play with June again. He just kind of stares at her, caught off guard and not really sure what to say. Jun pushes his chair back and stands up from the table. It's been a while since he's had to step in like this, but he knows it's time to take charge. He reached out to and his usual crew, and they answered right away, wanting to know what was up. He told them to track someone down and bring them over. Wasn't totally sure who he meant, so he asked for more details. Jun let everyone know that the people behind Dr. Genius's calculation only made it because they wanted more for themselves. He told the others to track down the person who caused so much trouble for parents everywhere and make sure that person faced him. And both nod, showing they're on board. Figures must really not be a fan of that calculation game. She tells to ignore whatever Jun says and promises to handle it herself. Even though hears her out, he can't help but stress. After all, he knows his master's orders always come first. Jun kept playing the cash register game with Seoul. Seoul acted like she was greeting a customer, staying in character. Jun slumped, clearly not into it. Seoul looked at him, waiting to see what he wanted. Jun just said he wanted to be free. Later that night, stood at the sink, scrubbing dishes. She kept thinking about how tired she was of waiting around, and how tonight it really hit her that she was on her own. Out of nowhere, called her name. Rose, caught off guard by how he addressed her. Spot standing there with a tray in her hands. He's caught off guard, not expecting to see her. Right away, he can't help but wonder how long she's been around, and he gets a bit uneasy. Everything about the moment feels tense for him, and he's clearly not comfortable with whatever might have seen or heard. Wasn't sure if it would come off the wrong way, but he wanted to help out. He wondered if would trust him with some easy stuff around the place, like washing dishes or cleaning up. Even though he felt a bit awkward bringing it up, he just wanted to show he could be useful. Nods, letting know she understands. She figures probably still trying to wrap her head around everything, so she suggests taking it easy for a bit. Looks unsure, not sure what to do next. Seeing this, offers another idea. Maybe could just hang out with her while she does the dishes. That sounds better too, so she goes along with it. While was busy at the sink, started sharing some stories. He mentioned that Master used to act just like her, never getting too hung up on rules and always treating everyone around him in a chill, easygoing way. Wondered if that could actually be true. Watches the woman and can't help but feel sorry for her. It's clear this lady is really deep into her role, almost like she's forgotten where she is. Figures things must have been rough for her back in that gate. On the other hand, has always been curious about how someone could act like that. But now, seeing this, it just seems like something that runs in the imperial family. Kept talking about her master, explaining how everyone saw him as a wise king. Guessed she was talking about Jun, and nodded. She went on, saying her master was the kind of person whose presence alone set the rules for everyone. She also mentions that, honestly, he was way more powerful and real than any religion or god she'd ever heard about. Starts thinking about what absolute existence even means. Her mind drifts back to a memory of Jun hanging out with Seoul. In that moment, she gave him 8,001, and he smiled and wished her a good day. Now, with all these thoughts spinning around, wonders if is actually talking about Jun. She tries to hide her amusement, almost letting out a laugh. Thought about how she'd basically raised Jun Jun, almost like a mom instead of a sister. The whole idea of him being some kind of god just didn't make sense to her. Wanted to know if really believed that. Wondered if people actually prayed to Jun and everything. Nodded, letting her know that it was true. Keeps thinking about it, curious if there might be places around with big statues or shrines showing him off. He wonders if there are even small busts of him set up here and there. Can tell Santu something and seems pretty impressed with how sharp he is. Nods as explains how tons of people pray to her master and treat him like someone really important. She points out that there are already hundreds of temples all over the continent, built just for her master and to celebrate everything he's done. Hears this and thinks it's honestly wild. Started thinking, trying to figure out if maybe North Korea was where got her idea from. She was curious, so she turned to and wanted to know if there were any other religions back where came from. Let her know that there used to be a bunch, but none of them were around anymore. Couldn't help but wonder if Jun had wiped out the other religions or something similar. Shakes his head, not agreeing with what's said. He explains that her master never forced anyone to give up their beliefs. Instead, people just naturally stopped following the old gods. Still confused, wants to know the reason behind it. Arrow told everyone that none of the gods stepped in to help directly. They just expect people to keep trusting them and worshipping them without really giving much back. Notices that pretty much every religion out there seems to work the same way. Kept talking, explaining how her master didn't just sit back. He actually stepped up and helped everyone out. He ended a war that felt like it would drag on forever, and more than once, he defended the whole continent whenever outsiders tried to invade. She went on, explaining that he wasn't just any ruler. He was an emperor for centuries, pulling off things most people could only dream of. In her mind, that's probably why everyone chose to follow the master instead of worshipping a god. Always talked about how awesome he was. He remembered how everyone used to look up to his master, giving compliments and respect. In his mind, those days were proof that he was someone worth noticing. She figured that was probably when her master hit the highest level as a ninth circle necromancer. Wondered if everyone really hated Jun, seemed confused, and wanted to know who was talking about. Explained she was talking about the gods, the ones who lost their followers and worshippers because of Jun. Nodded, agreeing with what she said. She pointed out that everyone probably felt pretty jealous of her master. Wasn't surprised at all. She'd already guessed as much. Then paused, almost backtracking, and said that was only true if their gods were even real to begin with. His phone started vibrating in his pocket. She checks her phone and sees it's the grocery store owner calling. It's pretty late, so she can't help but wonder what's up. She picks up the phone and listens, thinking it might be about tomorrow. She lets him know she gets what he's saying, tells him to keep her posted if anything's different, and thanks him for always looking out for her. After hanging up, looked over at. She brought up the grocery store job she told him about earlier. The owner wanted to see for an interview tomorrow at 3 p.m. She wanted to know if he could make it. Freezes for a second, not sure what's going on. He starts to wonder if this could actually be some kind of part-time gig. For a moment, he gets pumped, thinking maybe this is how his master's new kingdom really begins. The next day, the store owner was at the grocery shop, looking over a resume. He paused when he saw the name at the top, Mr. Running the store for over a decade, he'd done interviews with all kinds of people, probably hundreds by now. This felt like just another day, but there was something about the name that made him stop and think for a second. This was a first for the shop owner. He'd never had someone show up for a job dressed like this. Stood there in a sharp tuxedo, looking way overdressed for a normal interview. The owner asked his name and answered right away, full of energy. The owner looked at his suit and wondered if was sweating in all those layers. Just smiled and said he was completely fine, not bothered by the heat at all. The owner notices how tense looks and tries to ease the mood, not really getting why seems so worked up over a part-time job interview. Trying to play it cool, insists he's not nervous. The owner then says sorry for changing the interview time at the last minute, and explains that after what went down yesterday, all the other part-timers quit. The owner explains that filled him in a bit about what's been going on with. Apparently, she mentions memory has been kind of spotty ever since he came back from the gate. Doesn't hold back and admits it's true, a little louder than he probably means to. The owner tries to get him to chill out, noticing House practically drenched in sweat and acting way too nervous for the situation. Knows this is his first mission on Earth, and he can't mess it up. He reminds himself that right now, he's just a slave here. The owner lets him know that the morning shift isn't busy at all. There's not much going on, so it should be easy. All he'd really have to do is help customers, put out new stock, and keep the place clean. Drops into a deep O, not holding back at all. He's serious. You can tell he means every word as he promises to give this chance everything he's got, no matter what. The owner isn't expecting this at all and actually steps back, a bit thrown off by how intense it is. It almost looks like passion caught him off guard. The owner lets know there's no need to overdo it. He just wants him to show up on time and not skip any shifts. Shoots up from his chair, desperate and fired up. He really wants this part-time job. It's all he's been thinking about, and to him, it feels like his biggest goal right now. He can't let this shot slip away. The owner just looks at him, completely caught off guard. He always thought having a part-time job like this would be awesome. After a moment, he finally says can start work the next day, is pumped and really grateful, tries to figure out what he should call this important guy since he's just a lowly slave. He knows he has to be careful with how he acts. He remembers that this human from the top ranks stands higher than him, bent forward, showing respect to the owner who just stood there frozen. He called the owner sir, his voice loud and clear, hoping to make up for whatever just happened. Opened his eyes and saw the plain ceiling of a hospital room. His mind was all over the place, trying to figure out how he even got there. The last thing he remembered was a bunch of reporters crowding around him, snapping photos and asking questions that made his head hurt. Now, after all the checkups and noise, everything just felt confusing and unreal. Looked around the hospital room and couldn't help but notice how much nicer it was than his own place. The thought crossed his mind about how expensive staying there must be. Just then, a man wearing a suit walked in and set down a fruit basket. Without needing to be asked, he mentioned the price was around 3 million won. He also said there was a chance for a small discount if the stay was longer, but it probably wouldn't make much of a difference. Spots the visitor and realizes it's Du, the bureau chief. Du looks like he wants to sit down, and he points out that this isn't the first time they're meeting. Du showed up out of nowhere, looking a bit uneasy about dropping in unannounced. Didn't seem bothered, just curious about what brought him over. Du got straight to the point. He wanted to talk about the disaster rank gate that happened earlier. There was some stuff he needed to ask and some news to share, so he figured it was better to show up in person instead of just texting or calling. Du Kaial starts off by showing his appreciation for what did for everyone's safety. Just kind of shrugs it off, saying he didn't really do much. Then Du Kaial points out that, out of everyone who made it through the gate, is the only one still awake. The rest are all out cold. So for now, they have no choice but to trust whatever has to say about what happened, and agrees with that. Du Kai wanted to know what went down inside the disaster rank gate, so he turned to for the details. Started thinking about how he needed to be honest, but also careful not to spill anything about being involved. As he talked, he explained that the monsters inside weren't anything special to look at, but they were tough enough to give Hunter Hoon a hard time. In the end, it was the Frost Giant, the boss monster, that ended up taking down Hoon. Made sure to keep things vague, just in case anyone was listening too closely. Du scribbles down the name Frost Giant, thinking about how tough the regular monsters were. If those guys were that strong, the boss had to be even worse. It lines up with what they figured out from seeing Hoon. There was no way anyone could have fought back. Du Kaiol checks if Hoon is awake yet. He goes over what they know so far. Judging by the marks and injuries, it looks like Hoon was taken down instantly by something way too strong to fight off. Still, there's something about the whole thing that doesn't add up, and Du Kaiol can't figure out what it is. Du wondered who could have taken down such a strong boss monster and how they'd even managed it. Bong admitted he didn't really know. He'd blacked out when it happened, and he felt a bit bad about it. Du just let it go, not making a big deal out of it. Du let know that everyone appreciated him coming back safe. He also pointed out how crazy it was that they managed to clear a disaster-level gate with barely any damage, something that had never happened before anywhere in the world. A lot of other countries are starting to pay close attention now. Not knowing all the details is tough, and gets it too. Du tries to steer the conversation away, mentioning he's not only there for Bong's side of the story, but also to share some good news. Bong can't help but get a little anxious, his mind racing about what that good news could be. Du brings up the time managed to take down an A-rank necromancer from the Anti-Alliance near Digital Complex Station. Brushes it off, saying it was just luck. But Du points out that has now helped clear a disaster-level gate too, and at this point, it's clear that luck isn't the only thing going on. Couldn't help but wonder if they really meant him, since he figured Big Brother handled most of the work, and he just happened to be there at the right time. Then Du Kaiol let everyone know that, as a thank you for what he'd done, the Bureau had set up a few small rewards for him. Until his mom gets better from her illness, he can stay in a special hospital room for free. The place is usually just for people with powers, so is pretty surprised when he hears about it. Du Kaiol explains that, and the other part-time hunters are going to get medals and some prize money, plus a few perks that come with it. There's also going to be a memorial service for the hunters who lost their lives clearing the gate, and that'll happen at the same time as the awards ceremony. Went on explaining that Bongo's biggest win in all this was that his family would get free education forever. That news hit Bongo hard. He stood there, frozen, his mind racing back to Big Brother. Deep down, he felt seriously grateful. Stands up and lets everyone know that Hunter has been picked for a rank adjustment. Didn't see this coming, and it catches him off guard. Explains that because of how has been doing lately, he now gets a shot at a rank evaluation when the year ends. Du Kaiol really wanted to get a promotion, thinking he deserved a higher rank, but wasn't so sure and kind of brushed it off, saying he felt like sticking with C rank for now. The Bureau wanted to keep looking out for the country and everyone in it, even though he'd just gotten a promotion. Hearing this, couldn't help but think things were about to get complicated for him. Du heads out, letting know they'll meet again at the memorial. Isn't too sure about it, but he nods anyway. Sits by himself in his room, staring off into space. His mind keeps drifting, and he doesn't notice how quiet everything is around him. Somewhere else up on a dark rooftop, two shadowy figures stood close, keeping their voices low. One of them let the other know he'd gotten the info he was after. The second guy wanted to know what he'd found out. The first guy talks about an upcoming memorial and award ceremony that's happening soon for the disaster rank 8. When his friend wonders why it matters, he points out that it's the perfect day to put their plan into action, especially since everyone will be watching. The second guy gets what's going on. He points out they're going to grab and show everyone just how useless the Bureau actually is. The first one agrees. Then the second guy says after that, they'll try to convince to join up with their group that's against the Bureau. The first one decides that if their plan doesn't work, they'll just take them out. Later on, shows up at Jun's place, his hands full with shopping bags. The moment he steps inside, he spots. He's caught off guard, recognizing her from before, and can't help but think back to their last meeting. Stood there with a food whisk in her hand and gave a signal to keep things quiet. Looked at her, clearly not getting what was going on, his face showing he was totally lost. Showed up laughing like he was in on some private joke. Bongo looked over, confused and trying to figure out what was so funny. Noticed and told Bongo not to let it get to him. He explained that lady never bothers talking to anyone she thinks is weaker than her. Spotted Vest right away and wondered where he got the store vest from. Couldn't help but laugh, impressed that noticed so quickly. It was clear that had picked up on something most people would miss. Wondered if grabbed it from a donation box. Froze for a second, caught off guard, and let out a small cough. Out of nowhere, stopped what he was doing, cleared his throat, and gave a quick bow, acting super formal as he greeted like he was just another customer. Couldn't help but notice how weird was acting and started to question what was going on. Stood there with a bit of a grin, letting know that, starting today, he had picked up a part-time job at the GU store close by. He'd be working weekday mornings now, which seemed like a solid step for him. Nodded and gave a quiet congratulations, still a little unsure but trying to be supportive. Remembers talking about a job interview. He can't help but wonder if we'll handle the job all right. Jun was out on the balcony, looking kind of stuck. Noticed him and couldn't figure out why he was just standing there, locked out from inside. Jun just mentioned there was some old, sad story about how he ended up trapped out there, which left totally confused. Saul sat quietly on a little chair, just watching everything going on around him. He looked over at his uncle, Bongo, and told him what happened with his dad, that his dad had been caught stealing and ended up in jail. Looked over and wondered if Sol was playing some game with her dad. Sol nodded, all excited, and then pointed out that uncle was a thief too, so he'd be heading to jail. Just stood there, totally confused by what was going on. From the balcony, which now looked more like a jail cell door, Jun watched and told him to come inside. He tried to act welcoming, pointing out that it was first time in a place like this. Jun tried to make it sound normal, saying that people lived here just like anywhere else. Steps onto the balcony, finding Jun hanging out there. He can tell right away that Jun's older brother is super into his game, barely noticing anything else around him. Wonders if Jun has been stuck out here for a while. Jun wants to know what time it is. Figures it's close to 4 in the afternoon. Jun does the math and realizes he's been locked out here for about 3 hours since lunchtime. Bongo suddenly panicked, thinking it might have been 3 hours already. June, trying to lighten the mood, pointed out that at least in Seoul you could get bathroom breaks. He mentioned that she was pretty chill about it, which made the situation feel a bit less intense. Jun noticed showing up and wondered what brought him over today. Explained he was just dropping off a report since he'd missed the day before. Turns out, he'd been at the hospital and only just got back. Jun looked him over, trying to figure out what happened since didn't look hurt at all. Just said it wasn't simple, leaving Jun a little confused. Kept talking, explaining that this whole situation had been wrapped up without much fuss. In his head, he wondered if he'd messed something up and made people think the wrong thing, but he told himself it would all work out. June just nodded, thinking had done a solid job. Brings up that he needs a favor from Jun curious. Jun wonders what wants. Tells Jun about what went down with the bureau chief, and brings up that he's got a rank promotion test coming up at the end of the year. Jun figures probably stressing about looking bad in front of everyone. Lowers his head, looking desperate as he asks June for help. June looks at him, trying to figure out what kind of help actually wants. Does he just need someone to root for him, or is there something more? Tries to clear things up, saying he didn't mean what Jun thought. He actually just wants some training while he waits, hoping he might get a little better. Jun looks at him and tells him to think about it for a second, like he's trying to get to see the bigger picture. June wanted to know if really believed that cramming at the last minute could take someone from knowing nothing to getting a perfect score. Didn't answer right away, looking unsure. Jun quickly backtracks, mentioning he might be able to bump his score up by 10 points. Looks at him, caught off guard by the sudden boost. Jun just nods, sticking to his answer. Jun tells that the necromancer they ran into earlier is probably worth around 10 points. Gets a bit anxious, thinking back to the necromancer from the Anti-Bureau Alliance, the same one he beat before. Jun confirms it's that guy. Jun just grinned, thinking about the guy he ran into at the gate earlier. earlier. In his head, that dude barely scraped up to 10 points. Definitely not impressive. He wondered if calling him out like that would be enough. Bongo gets really pumped and throws his hands up, making it clear that it's way more than he needed. Truth is, it's actually a bit over the top for him. June just says yeah and tells him to show up at his place tomorrow, right at 8 in the morning to get started. Bao keeps saying thanks, looking really grateful. Bong suddenly remembers something important. He tells the others about a big memorial service and award ceremony that happens before the promotion exam. It's an event where people honor hunters who lost their lives while clearing the gate, and they also hand out medals to the part-time hunters who helped out. Bongo let June know that everything that happened was because of him. He even said that if there was any reward money, he'd hand it all over to June. Showed up at the balcony door out of nowhere, waving his hands around and catching off guard. He looked pumped, clearly happy for, and started going on about how was finally heading in the right direction. Mentioned that was about to get a medal in front of everyone, making a big deal out of it, and acting like this was the proof that was making it. Tells it's a good idea to snap plenty of photos with his sister. He thinks their mom would like to see them once she's feeling better. Scratched his head, looking a bit unsure. He figured he'd have to go by himself since his sister's college entrance exam was coming up soon. His mom was way more focused on his sister getting into a good college than on any photos from the ceremony. Jun wondered if was really going alone and nodded, confirming it. Jun remembers how he was always by himself. His older sister worked all the time to support them, and she always looked worn out. She was so busy that he didn't even bother asking her to show up at his graduation. Jun folded his arms and told he'd tag along. Didn't see that coming. Jun just shrugged and let him know that being alone on a big day like this kind of sucked. Really appreciates Jun sticking around for him, even though he didn't have to. Jun just shrugs it off, hinting that actions mean more than words when it comes to showing thanks. Suddenly, remembers something important about the day of the award ceremony, and it hits him so hard that he ends up blurting out in surprise. Saul handed over a gift, his excitement pretty obvious as he called out the name Princess Sophie. Let everyone know that Princess Sophie was Saul's absolute favorite, and he made sure to mention to Uncle that he brought her just for Saul. Saul couldn't help but get excited. She ran over to her Uncle Bongo, grinning, and let him know she wanted to hang out with Princess Sophie. Looks at her wondering if she wants to hang out and play. Soul gets startled for a second, but then quickly says yes, happy to join in. And Soul started messing around with the new toy, having fun with it while Jun hung back on the balcony. He looked over at the princess, pretty unsure about what was going to happen to him. Meanwhile, Soul got a little lost in his own thoughts, quietly thinking things through. She just walks right by him like he's not even there and goes straight to her little pink chair. She climbs up, settles in, and looks perfectly at ease. Soul folded her arms, looking serious, as she made it clear that people who steal end up in jail. Off to the side, Jun tried to defend himself, insisting he hadn't taken anything. Jun stood out on the balcony, looking trapped and not happy about it. There was this heavy, dark vibe around him, like he was mad at the world. He glared at who was still busy playing his game and didn't seem bothered at all. Jun was clearly upset, throwing insults and blaming for getting out by paying off the guard. Though just kept playing and acted like he didn't even get what Jun was talking about. Just grins and tells Jun he should call it bail instead. Jun isn't having it and starts yelling, but just waves him off, acting like it's no big deal. He promises to see Jun when he gets out, whenever that happens. As heads out, Jun keeps shouting his name, not ready to let it go. Jun comes to a sudden stop. His face shifts like something's up, and he quietly asks himself a question. He gets really serious, trying to figure out what's going on inside him. Deep down, he notices something weird, like there's a tiny bit of mana barely there, but he can sense it if he really focuses. He looks around, trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. Somewhere in a quiet park, a guy sat alone on a bench. He checked his phone, but there was nothing. No messages, no calls, nothing loading. It looked like everything had just gone dark. He turned to his friend and told her the spy bug he sent out got wrecked. That meant must figured out someone was keeping an eye on him. The guy wasn't just some regular dude. He was way sharper than he looked, and it was clear now that he wasn't your average son. Turns out the guy's name is, and he's ranked 8th in the Anti-Bureau Alliance. He points out how impressive it is that, even though he's only C rank, managed to take out the necromancer they'd spent so much effort building up. Didn't even get hurt in the fight. Thinking that if they can somehow get on their side, he'd be a serious asset to their team. Lee, who's ranked 12th and known for her skills in torture, sat there eating her ice cream. She mentioned that she actually wanted the target to put up a fight and not quit too easily. In her eyes, it'd be way more entertaining if the guy thought he was some kind of hero, even if he was just a loser. That would give them plenty of time to mess around with him, and when it stopped being interesting, they'd just get rid of him. Realized they hadn't given the target enough credit. The guy could could spot a spy bug even when it barely used any mana, proof that his mana skills had to be S rank or even better. Heiji just laughed to himself, already looking forward to what was coming next. Figures his strength and fighting skills are probably up there with a rank hunters. Du-hoon heads back for the time being. He and step through a glowing portal, leaving the place behind as the world around them shifts in an instant. The next day, Jun handed some training weights and told him he had to wear them all the time from now on. Looked a bit confused, trying to figure out what they were. Jun just shot him a look, making it obvious he thought the answer was super obvious, and tossed in a comment about maybe picking up a book once in a while. Jun couldn't believe had never watched Dragon Ball. He started explaining how in the show, Sun would train wearing these super heavy clothes. Whenever a big fight started, would drop the weights and suddenly move way faster than before. Saw what just happened, but he couldn't help doubting if this old school training would actually do anything. Jun pointed out that this kind of stuff pops up in other places too, like when someone trains wearing heavy gear and then ditches it to get stronger right before things go south. Wasn't so sure though. He started thinking his joints might give out before he got any stronger, especially since he's more about magic than brute force. Jun cut things off, clearly done with the whole topic. He told not to bother wearing the stuff if he didn't want to, even though he'd dropped a ton of cash on it. Not wanting to upset him, changed his tune fast and tried to smooth things over. Jun, feeling pretty confident, started bragging about how tons of people would do anything to train under him, probably enough to make a line that circled the globe a few times. Bongo stands there with weights strapped to his wrists and ankles, his whole body shaking. He tries to play it cool, but inside, he's not really sure how he's supposed to handle this. These things are way heavier than he thought they'd be. He figures they've got to be at least 10 kilos each. Jun shot a look, making it clear he wanted him to hang out with Saul right then. Hesitated, not really sure what was going on, but Jun wasn't messing around. He had this serious vibe that told not to push his luck. Saul got tense, watching the whole thing, and quickly agreed, not wanting any trouble. Crouched down, his back aching a bit as he reached for Saul. It hit him how much heavier things felt when he moved like that. Maybe it was just one of those days. Saul looked excited, clearly ready for some fun. Wondered what game she wanted to play, curious about what she'd come up with this time. Saul gets excited and points straight at the cash register toy, really wanting to try it out. Starts to sweat as it suddenly hits him. This is that never-ending math game warned about. Nods, looking pretty unsure, and carefully takes a seat at the game. His hands are shaking a little as he gets ready to play. Struggles to pick up a tiny toy piece. His hands are shaking, and the piece feels way heavier than it should. Just trying to lift it while sitting there makes his arm ache like it might give out. He starts to wonder if he's actually this weak. Bongo, with those weights still strapped on, feels totally stuck. He remembers all the time he spent in the game 8000 years, which is insane when you think about it. Now, looking at how weak he is, he just can't figure out how he's supposed to help his family or find that elixir to save his mom. Everything just seems way out of reach. A few hours pass and is completely wiped out, dropping to the floor from exhaustion. Decides she's done with the cash register game and wants to stop. Figures he can finally take a break, thinking the games are over. But then Solo says she wants to start a new game, catching off guard. The story kicks off with Saul, the magical girl, standing there with a magic wand in her hand. She gets straight to it, casting a spell and making the villain Bongo drop to the ground. But she doesn't let up. Right after that, she tells him to get back up and go at it again, just like she's running the whole show. The game kept going as Soul kept telling the villain to fall over and over again. Completely worn out, dropped to his knees and pleaded with her, desperate for a break. Next, they dive into a game known for being so intense that even dragons would be nervous. Bongo gets ready, lifting his soul up as he faces the challenge, his hands shaking a bit from the pressure of the heavy weights. Next up was the creepy rocking horse game, the kind that would freak out even the toughest guys. Bongo didn't have much choice. He had to be the horse for Soul, and it was clear he wasn't loving it. At last, they try out the wild demonic centrifuge game. Bongo grabs Soul and starts spinning her around super fast. Soul can't help but scream, totally caught up in the thrill of it all. Once babysitting was over, it was time to start housework training. Soul was knocked out on the floor, fast asleep. While still stuck with those heavy weights, got a new set of chores from Jun, who wasn't even in the room. First, had to scrub the greasy mess off the gas stove. Then he had to tackle the laundry, making sure to keep the white clothes away from the dark ones. And when that was finally done, he still had to clean up the whole place. Each new task left more tired, but he answered every order anyway. The next day goes by with Bongo busy around the house. He folds laundry, messes around with a saw, mops the floors, wipes down the windows, and runs the vacuum, all with those heavy weights still strapped to him. Every move looks tougher than usual, but he keeps going, not slowing down even when it gets tough. A week later, Bongo looks wiped out. Every day, he feels more tired than the last. He tries to tell himself that Big Brother has a reason for putting him through this, and starts to wonder if it's all just some kind of test to see how long he'll stick it out. All of a sudden, Bongo notices something off. He can't shake the thought that this training isn't normal. His mind drifts to stories he's heard, like that chef who was stuck just chopping veggies for years, or a cartoonist's helper who spent ages just practicing drawing lines. It's starting to feel like he's in the same boat. Thinks about all the stories he's heard and realizes that stuff like this happens a lot. Deep down, he knew Big Brother was just pushing him to see how far he could go, just like always. Actually feels kind of excited about it, thinking this is exactly what he expected from Big Brother. A week slipped by, and soon enough, Jun hit up to remind him that the month was already over. Jun wanted to know when the promotion exam was, so he checked in reminded him that it was set for early December. That left them with about 2 months to get ready. Jun realized how quickly the day had passed. He thought about all the time he'd wasted goofing off. Now, he knew it was time to get serious and finally start his real training. Jun wanted to know when the memorial and award ceremony was happening, so he brought it up too. Double-checked and realized he'd already mentioned the date before, October 1st. That meant the event was actually happening the next day. Jun made up his mind they'd go to the ceremony the next day. After that, real training would finally begin. Looked excited, wondering if this meant he was officially in. Jun didn't expect that. Meanwhile, just grinned, acting like he'd seen it coming the whole time. He started going on about how he's smart, and that's the only reason he's managed to stick around for so long. According to him, nothing gets past him. Felt sure that Jun had been pushing his limits on purpose these past 2 weeks, seeing how much patience and grit he really had. Jun, not really sure how to answer, just nods and admits he did it, but only because he thought it'd be fun. Deep down, he's relieved that's all there is to it. Jun gave a pat on the shoulder, letting him know he'd done a good job up to now. He told him to get ready for tomorrow, but in his head, Jun figured he'd just let believe whatever he wanted. Back at the apartment, sat on his cushion, stuck in his puppy form. He glared at nothing in particular, clearly annoyed as he thought about the immortal, the guy who kept causing him trouble. Meanwhile, over in C was hanging out with the guys from the Anti-Bureau Alliance. Lee walked up to him, letting him know that the grand plan was about to kick off. Turns to, eyes bright, clearly hyped for what's coming up. Keeps it real, pointing out that their target is exactly a pushover. Just grins, totally unfazed, and that only makes her more pumped for the challenge. Checks out the group that's gathered. He lets everyone know what's up. The plan is set for tomorrow. They'll wait until the award ceremony starts before making their move. As soon as known for being a loyal son sets foot on the stage, everything changes. The group waiting in the shadows is ready to act. They rush in, throw the whole place into confusion, grab, and vanish before anyone can react. On the day of the ceremony, Jun shows up in a suit and a coat. He's clearly not used to wearing this kind of thing, shifting around and tugging at his sleeves. It's obvious he thinks it's uncomfortable and awkward. Even though he's not saying much, someone off to the side gives him a quick boost, pointing out that he actually pulls off the look pretty well. Straightened her clothes while getting ready. Jun checked one more time if she really wasn't going out with them. He told her he'd be heading out with the young lady since Lord had to stay back and handle things at the store. Before they left, reminded Jun to pass along her congratulations to Mr., and Jun promised he would. Shows up in a sharp black suit, looking ready for something important. Jun lets her know it's time to head out, and she gives him a quick nod, letting him know she's good to go. Jun was just about ready to head out when his daughter, Saul, called out to him, her voice full of excitement. Saul shows up in a bright yellow dress with bows, looking all put together as she waves goodbye to Jun, hoping he has a good trip. Jun can't help but notice how cute she looks, and for a second that's all he can really think about. Pats pat on the head, pretty proud of her for acting so well behaved. He thinks back to that kids show she watched earlier in the day. Looks like she actually picked up something about how to greet people and show good manners. Brings up how Jun was really into those shows when he was a kid. He mentions how Jun even went as far as writing letters and mailing them in. Asks if Jun remembers any of that, but Jun just looks a bit unsure, not really certain if he ever did it. Jun gave Saul a gentle pat on the head before heading out. As he walked away, he couldn't help but notice how good it felt to have someone care enough to wish him a safe trip. That small moment of kindness stuck with him, making the day feel a little brighter. Jun showed up at the busy ceremony, moving with purpose like he had somewhere important to be. Jun watched as a young kid tugged at his mom's sleeve, quietly asking if it was finally safe to stop hiding. His mom knelt down, giving him a gentle smile, and told him everything was all right now. The hunters had taken down all the monsters, so they didn't have to be scared or stay hidden anymore. The kid gets all excited, saying he wants to be a hunter when he grows up so he can fight monsters. June just stands there, watching everything quietly. June looks around, thinking it all seems pretty calm. At first, he figures everyone just doesn't care about what's going on. He starts to notice that everyone around him is just acting like they trust the hunters to protect them. Deep down, they don't really believe it. They're just hoping all the stuff they see on the news won't happen to them. It's like they're following a routine that doesn't even belong to them anymore. Jun looked around, thinking to himself how messed up things seemed sometimes. Dressed sharp in a suit like Jun, noticed him and seemed caught off guard, probably wondering what Jun was thinking about. Jun brushed it off, not wanting to get into it, and instead turned his attention to the crowd. With so many people here, he wondered if this was some huge event. Nods, letting everyone know that shutting down this disaster class gate was a big deal for people everywhere. It was the first time anyone managed to handle a gate like this without things getting out of hand. News had already spread that some well-known hunters would show up too, making it clear this was something everyone was talking about online. Because of that, people from other countries started watching too, and now reporters and cameras from all over are showing up. Jun scans the crowd standing with the hunters. Most of them don't look like much. They seem pretty average. Even the ones who stand out aren't anything special. Jun spots looking really pale and kind of out of it. He checks on him and shares that he's the only one from the returning hunters who has to go up on stage today. Everyone else is either still knocked out or too hurt to be there, so it's all on him. As the crowd starts to settle, an organizer walks over and lets everyone know it's time to find their seats. The memorial and the award ceremony are about to kick off, so nods and heads to where he's supposed to sit. Stood up, letting Jun know he was heading out. He gave Jun a quick nod, hinting for him to grab his spot too. Jun watched him go, silently hoping things would go well for him. The ceremony kicks off with someone giving a speech, talking about when the first gates showed up, and reminding everyone that the Bureau is still on the job, keeping the country safe. Jun sat there trying to keep his eyes open. He was bored, and it felt like nobody really cared about what was going on. All he wanted was for them to hurry up, give out the awards, and let everyone leave. After the applause died down, the speaker called Hunter up to the stage. Known for his loyalty and dedication, was chosen to represent all the hunters who had come back. He was there to honor the ones who didn't make it through the tough fight. As finally walked up to the stage, Jun watched him and couldn't help but smile. Heads up to the podium, clearly uneasy. Jun watches him and can't help but notice how stiff and awkward seems, almost like he's just going through the motions. Out of nowhere, Jun's face tenses up. Something's not right. He can sense danger in the air. Picks up on it too and quickly tries to get her master's attention. Points out that it looks like someone's up to no good, and Jun nods, thinking the same thing. Jun leans back in his chair, lost in thought. He can't shake off the curiosity about who might be stirring things up. The whole situation has him on edge, and he keeps running through possible names in his head. Jun thinks back to what the kid said about hiding. Even now, remembering those words gets under his skin. He could tell these planners were the kind of people who didn't ask for permission. They just went after what they wanted, no hesitation. It was obvious what they were after. Jun tries to convince himself that none of this really matters to him. Still, he can't shake the memory of Sol's face when she told him to have a safe trip. It keeps popping into his head, making him pause for a moment. Jun really isn't into this whole situation. Whenever calls him master, it just feels weird. Deep down, he can't stand having to act like some hero, especially when it doesn't feel right at all. He figures the hunters will step in if something goes wrong, but Jun thinks back to the last family dinner. He hopes that tonight, Sol will actually look happy at the table, maybe even crack a smile. Jun shoots up from his seat in the middle of the crowd, deciding he can't just chill and watch anymore. The people nearby look at him, a bit confused. One guy grumbles because Jun is now blocking his view. Someone else is a little annoyed, wondering why Jun just stood up out of nowhere, and another person tells him to sit back down. Jun looked over at who was known as the Minister of the Interior. He wanted her full attention, so he made sure she was listening, nodded, letting him know she was ready to hear what he had to say. Jun made it clear they had to stop whoever was behind all this. He told her not to let any of them get away, except for the one in charge. They'd need him for answers. Arrow nodded, showing she understood what needed to be done. Jun didn't hold back. He gave the signal, telling her to go all in and use everything she had. Things get wild fast as people start yelling in pain. Stood on the rooftop, surrounded by bodies and blood. He grabbed his radio and let everyone know the rooftop was clear. Sits on top of a defeated enemy, holding his radio close. Updates come in from his team. The bomb squad has finished setting explosives at every spot they needed to hit, and the crew in the engine room has locked things down tight. He checks in with the infiltration team, and they answer right away. They're set to go too. As soon as, known for being a loyal son, walks onto the stage, lets everyone know it's time to start the plan. He lets everyone know that there are 8 bombs hidden in the building, and they're all set to go off together. After that, the elite unit moves in fast, breaking into the conference hall. They don't waste any time, taking out everyone in their way and grabbing their target before anyone can react. At the same time, he's got sniper hosts under his control, thanks to those weird magic parasites. He's planning to use them to hold off any backup that shows up. Pretty confident about it. He's run this scenario hundreds of times and doesn't see how it could go wrong. Do-hoon spots the target walking out onto the stage. Right then, his earpiece crackles to life with someone yelling, clearly freaked out and demanding to know who's on the line. Do-hoon tenses up, realizing things are about to get real. Do-hoon looks uneasy, trying to figure out what's going on. He can't help but think the infiltration team might have been caught. In the background, he picks up the sound of someone else pleading for their life, and it makes him tense up even more. Hoon quickly recognizes the voices coming through his radio. They're from the engine room crew. He asks them to check in, but all he hears is chaos. People are yelling. Some are clearly panicking, and someone's desperately calling for help. In the background, another person shouts at everyone to get out of there fast, grabs the radio and tries reaching out to the engine room team again. He calls for an update, but all he gets is static crackling back at him. No response. News came in that the explosives team barely made it out, but at least all the bombs were taken care of. Couldn't believe what he was hearing. He grabs his head, frustrated and stunned. All the top teams they picked for this mission, gone or totally silent in under a minute. He's trying to wrap his mind around it, thinking nothing about this makes sense. Takes a good look at what's going on. He notices that the person who got hit first wasn't just some random staff member. It was actually a decoy agent pretending to work the event close to the hall. He also remembers that each floor in this building is pretty big, around 20,000 square meters. It usually takes a few minutes just to get from the hall to the engine room, maybe even longer if someone's trying to be careful. Can still remember the voices he picked up on the radio, people begging and yelling for help. It crosses his mind that maybe the Bureau found them, but he quickly pushes that idea aside. That's not really how the Bureau operates. He figures if the infiltration team got caught first, there must have been more than one group on the move at the same time. Still, he's sure the Bureau wouldn't go about things that way. The Bureau usually tries to catch people without making a huge scene. Even if they'd figured out what was going on, they wouldn't have gone this hard. That's why he starts wondering who's really behind all of this. Lee shows up next to, pointing out that they've got someone crashing the party. Wanting to know exactly what's going on, tells her to fill him in. Still in her usual good mood, casually wonders if she should take care of the woman herself. Hoon looked over, caught off guard, and tried to figure out which girl she meant. He didn't remember anyone like that on the team. Ji nodded and told him there was a woman on the assault squad, saying she was really good looking and that she wanted to hang out with her for a while. Could tell right away that opponent was way stronger than normal, so he tried to get her to hang back, but didn't listen. She just told him she'd check in after handling things on her own and ended the call. Wanted more info, trying to find out how many enemies were around. Before disconnecting, let him know there was just one for now, then she was gone. Notices he can't reach the assault team down at the aquarium anymore. It hits him. Someone took out the whole team and managed to trap Lee too. He's left thinking about who could actually pull something like this off. He thinks about heading over to help his friends and grabs the radio, trying again to see if anyone's out there who can hear him. A voice crackled through the radio, letting know he was being heard. Annoyed and a bit on edge, demanded to know who was on the other side. Jun's voice came through the radio, sounding just as sarcastic as ever. Hearing it, Do-hoon froze up. His fear kicked up a notch and his eyes got even wider. He slips away as everything around him fades to black. Jun's voice pops into his head, pushing him to give it a shot. Somewhere else in the building, Lee steps back from, careful not to trip over the bodies lying around. He can't help but be amazed at how insanely strong this woman is. The rest of the assault team got ready to move in. One of them pointed out that they should deal with her before worrying about anything else. Everyone knew they needed to take someone down right now and not waste any time. Looked at trying to figure out who she really was. Introduced herself as the minister of the imperial household and thanked for what she'd done. Even though had acted without thinking about the risks, seemed honestly grateful. Let her know that now, because of her, she could actually help her master again after what felt like forever. Realized she'd never heard his name before and started to wonder if maybe was some hunter from another country or something. Promised to remember her name as a way to say thanks. Wants to know her name. He hints that she's probably going to be surprised when she finds out what it is. Stepped forward and let everyone know her name. Lee. She mentioned her job as an interrogation technician, throwing it out there like it was just another fact. She wondered if anyone recognized her name. Then, with a calm confidence, she made it clear that she knew her way around torture, and she didn't seem shy about it at all. Arrow called out Heeji's bad attitude, making it clear she still had a lot to learn about showing respect. It was like Arrow was pointing out that being late wasn't just about time. It was about knowing how to act around others, too. When she said she was going to teach herself, just stood there completely stunned. Looks at and lets him know he shouldn't waste time thinking about some fancy way to go out. Everyone knew didn't care much about what people thought. Like said, she could be pretty rude, and most people just saw her as trouble. Charges straight at, certain she's got the upper hand. She's always believed whips don't work well up close, and right now, she feels like she's right where she belongs. Steps up and uses the first form of Empire's etiquette. Didn't see that coming and is caught off guard. Stepped up and landed a solid hit on, letting everyone know that things were set and ready to go. Lets out a quiet groan, clearly hurting. Not wanting any trouble, tells her to keep it down. Lets out a cry, clearly hurting. Doesn't waste any time. He gets serious and pulls out Empire's etiquette second form, ready to take things up a notch. She explains that the form is just to get ready for some kind of audience. G suddenly ends up somewhere new and looks around, confused about where they've landed. G looks up, his eyes wide. He didn't expect that, and it definitely catches him off guard. Lets her know she can't meet the king looking like she just came from a fight. She has to clean up and hand over all her weapons first. As she starts to get ready, a surprising number of hidden blades and gadgets start dropping out from her clothes. Moved so fast that barely saw her coming. In just a second was on the ground, unable to move with holding her down. Couldn't help but notice how insanely quick was. Told her to stay down and press her forehead to the floor, but G didn't do what he said. She held back, not giving in to his command. Starts to cry, tears streaming down her face as she admits she messed up. She's desperate for forgiveness, hoping someone will go easy on her. Arrow grabbed by the hair, noticing how she was finally starting to act the way he wanted. For a second, he thought she actually looked kind of cute when she listened. Even then, kept pleading, hoping he'd let go. Points out that she was the one who told herself to stay calm just a moment ago. G can't help but yell out, saying it's way too much to handle. Notices that even though she's nervous, she's starting to look a bit more prepared to meet the king. Takes a breath and gets himself together, going through the steps of Empire's third form. He looks focused, knowing exactly what to do next. Meanwhile, G isn't giving up, still pleading and hoping for a break, but isn't letting up. Lets everyone know that the form they're doing is actually for an imperial audience. She points out to that when she steps up in front of the emperor, she has to be extra careful and keep her gaze low, never looking up past his knees. Looks at and acts like she's just some disrespectful kid. He points out that she should be thankful she gets to go along with her master today. Pulled her hair back, her mind wandering to what could have happened if her master had left with Grand Duke and Sue the doll instead of her. She couldn't help but imagine how different things might be right now. She thinks there's no way would just lie there looking so calm with her eyes shut. Now, it's just lying on the floor, not moving at all. Nobody can tell if she's out cold or worse. Over in the ceremony hall, Jun stood there messing with his tie. He looked like he couldn't care less about what was going on. He glanced over at someone, maybe talking about the radio that got dropped, and told him to just finish the guy off. Up on the rooftop, Do-hoon stands there looking pretty mad. He sizes up the other guy and just knows that no amount of warnings will get through to him. Do-hoon makes it clear that things are about to get serious, and regret isn't going to fix anything now. Right then, his crew shows up behind him, ready for whatever comes next. Spots something off with the ways guys are moving around. It's not normal. They're twitchy, almost like they aren't in control of themselves. He looks closer and catches sight of small bugs crawling on them. That's when it clicks for him. These bugs are actually calling the shots, not the guys themselves. June looked at Do-hoon, thinking about the weird bugs that showed up at his house. He kept wondering if Do-hoon was behind it and tried to figure out why he would even do something like that. The whole thing just didn't make sense to him. Thinks it over for a moment and realizes that Jun must be the one who took down the. Jun warned that he'd keep facing the same pain over and over until he gave in, but just looked at him, not backing down at all. It was like he thought Jun had no clue what was really going on. Didn't seem scared. He just stood his ground as if daring Jun to go ahead and do his worst. Skies let loose with their guns, blasting away without holding back. Jun just vanished out of nowhere, stood there completely thrown off, trying to figure out where Jun could have gone. King Jun showed up out of nowhere, catching off guard. Froze, completely rattled, while King Jun just stared him down, almost daring him to do something. It was like King Jun remembered earlier threats and wanted to see if he'd actually follow through now that things got real. Jun looked at him with a steady gaze, almost as if he was giving him a challenge. He made it clear that the guys under his command were there for a reason, like they were resources just waiting to be used. Jun wanted him to see the value in his crew, hinting that the real strength of the group came from working together and relying on each other. He always says he'd rather stay out of messy situations. Getting involved in anything that might stain his hands just isn't his thing. His head pounds as the mana hits him hard, too strong for his body to handle. His nose starts bleeding, and just like that, he notices all the parasites he'd sent out are suddenly gone. It sinks in fast, and he can't help but feel rattled by how quickly everything changed. His heart pounds as he stares at all the mana in front of him. It's way more power than he expected, and he can barely believe what he's seeing. He feels small and uneasy, not sure what's about to happen next. He looks around, and suddenly the whole place changes. The ground turns a deep burning red, and everything around him starts to look like something straight out of a nightmare. It's like the world flipped into a fiery, messed up version of itself, and he can't help but feel the heat and tension rising all around. Stands frozen, not sure what to think as strange things start happening around him. Out of nowhere, tons of glowing red eyes light up in the darkness, staring right at him. Spots the eyes and quickly sees they're coming from skeletons. But these aren't just any old bones. There's something different about them. Something way beyond anything he's heard stories about before. He realizes that anyone who can control these skeletons must be powerful. He figured the guy had to be some kind of top-level necromancer. Gets thrown off. He can't figure out how a necromancer manages to hit like that and move that quick. It doesn't add up for him, and he can't help but question what's really going on. His chest tightened as the mana pressed in from all sides, making it hard to breathe. The power difference was just too much, There was no way he could fight back. He realized this was it. There was nothing left he could do. Do-hoon hears Jun's voice, and in that moment he wonders if he's nervous. Jun walked up to, who was down on his knees and clearly worn out. Looked like he had been through a lot, barely able to catch his breath. Jun stood over him, almost challenging him, and made think about whether what he was going through made giving up seem easier. Jun made it clear that things weren't going to end quietly for. Not really understanding where this was going, just stared back, trying to figure out what Jun was getting at. Jun lets him know that he's not planning to stop anytime soon. He's going to keep bringing him back, no matter how many times it takes, until he gets all the answers he's looking for. King Jun wanted to see for himself, so he offered him a chance to try it. Lets out a painful scream as Jun ends his life. Even in his final moments, tries to push Jun to leave, hinting that they'll cross paths again soon. Jolt's awake, breathing hard and confused. For a second, he just stares around, trying to figure out how he's even here. He remembers everything going black, totally convinced that was the end. Now lying there, he can't wrap his head around how he's still alive. Jun tells him to open his eyes, a sarcastic grin on his face as he brings up how his first death went. He jokes about it not being entertaining at all, then points out that this is the same pain all the bodies Do-hoon handed over to him must have felt. Jun looked over at, waiting to see if he was finally ready to come clean and take a break, but just shook his head, not wanting to talk yet. Jun suddenly steps in, making it clear he's not done yet. He decides that if won't talk, he'll just keep taking him out and bringing him back over and over until finally gives in. On a rooftop by bloodstains and a shattered glass door, an ominous mood settles as the narrator reveals that the so-called Anti-Bureau Federation has set its sights on. Maintaining his composed stance above the bloodstained ground, the MC reflected that all the information gleaned so far pointed to their enemies being shrewd and calculating. In that heavy moment, he imagined the city's hope unraveling. Should the celebrated rookie turn traitor or perish in a massacre, the crowd's faith would shatter, leaving only fear and suspicion stalking the bureau's every step. Then, fueled by unwavering resolve, he calculated that if he struck down the enemy's boss, the rest would surely fall, reaffirming his vow to shield the bright innocence of his princess from any threat. Moments later, the oppressive silence thickened as the glowing voids awaited an answer, their spectral demand hanging in the air like a final verdict. The blood beneath him grew darker as terror tightened his chest, and he struggled futilely against invisible bonds, his mind racing to make sense of the magic restraining him. Then, as the terrified captive writhed in panic, he smirked coldly and warned that uttering a forbidden word would be fatal, adding with a cruel indifference that he had no intention of reviving anyone foolish enough to test him. Moments later, the man's trembling lips parted once more, but only a strangled sound escaped as sweat and tears mingled on his face, the desperate urge to speak stifled by pain and the futility of hope. Then, pushing past the agony twisting his features, he managed to stammer out his gratitude before struggling to reveal the truth that weighed so heavily on him. In response, the explosion's blinding shockwave forced both combatants to brace themselves, as the young man's determination clashed with the undead figure's menacing power. As the shockwave's echoes faded, he straightened against the city backdrop, and his resolve hardened, told his lord that since there was no other choice, they would now wipe out any adversary they saw. In the dim aftermath of violence, he calmly adjusted his tie beside a blood-stained floor, quietly commending his companion for her work and suggesting they head back as the woman, standing near the broken window, nodded in relief. The man's steady gaze met hers amid the scattered blood stains, and as tension lingered in the air, she voiced her anxious question about the cleanup, causing him to pause and turn back in measured response. On a blood-stained rooftop scattered with shattered glass, Het stretched calmly as the worried woman stood behind him, his assured demeanor steadying the tension while he suggested they leave to congratulate and perhaps take a commemorative photo. At that same moment, in a formal setting echoing gratitude, a man pinned an award to a boy's suit, commending everyone's efforts as he nervously expressed his thanks. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room far from the rune's glow, the solitude known as Black Wolf sat in quiet judgment, his skeptical gaze fixed as he privately doubted the new hero's reputation, and concluded there was no need to recruit him yet. Then, as the atmosphere thickened with skepticism, the muscular, red-haired Solitude Vice and 6th-ranked S-rank Hunter sat with arms crossed, exuding silent authority while someone nearby expressed doubt about his apparent lack of toughness and manliness. In a tense, charged silence, two men, one focused and tense, the other visibly anxious, stared at their phones, their shock deepening as unexpected notifications flashed across the screens. Shrouded in ominous shadows, both crouched low as one noted the arrival of uninvited guests, and the other agreed with a wary nod, both bracing for confrontation. Then, as the realization struck, his companion blurted out his disbelief, the moment thick with shock while the other man's steady presence offered silent reassurance amid the uncertainty. The companion, still gripped by worry, scanned the chaos before them while the other person pressed for answers, their gazes drawn to the fallen figure sprawled near the bloodstains. Then, as his eyes lingered over the corpses on the rooftop, he noted with unease that their attire and appearance resembled one of the groups they both recognized. Continuing from the grim realization about the victims' identities, the investigator knelt closer to the headless body, pointing out the executive-level tattoo beneath its neck, while the shocked onlooker, voice trembling, questioned aloud who could possibly have killed a high-ranking anti-Bureau Federation murderer in such a brutal fashion. The abrupt buzz of the phone sent a shock through him, forcing his hand instinctively toward his pocket as the tension in the room sharpened. Then, as the phone call continued, the kneeling man relayed in a shaken voice that dozens of anti-Bureau Federation murderers' bodies had been discovered throughout the building, most clustered near the underground aquarium, and among them, one suspected to be Executive Interrogation Officer Lee. The atmosphere grew even more oppressive as his companion, visibly unsettled, tried to process the astonishing revelation, suspicion flickering in his eyes as he questioned how such a powerful enemy could have been defeated so covertly. On a rooftop beneath a cloudless sky, the uneasy silence was broken by the sight of fresh bloodstains, prompting those present to question the troubling events and resolve to inform the bureau director without delay. Inside the cavernous, nearly empty auditorium, the MC and a woman moved quietly between rows, their worried glances exchanged as he admitted they were probably too late, and she softly agreed, resignation settling between them like a hush. On stage, as anticipation lingered in the air from the earlier resignation in the empty auditorium, 5 suited men stood before the red curtains, with one authoritatively proposing they delay proceedings, a bit despite their busy schedule, and another calmly agreeing. Moments later, the worried man nervously scratched his head while, in the silence between empty rows, he confessed to the MC that trouble was coming, urging him to understand the gravity of the threat and admitting his own help could not last forever. As the weight of this realization settled, he clutched the folder, anxiety flickering in his eyes as he questioned whether his own choices might have brought misfortune upon. The tension in his grip gave way to a newfound resolve as he crossed his arms, closed his eyes, and assured with determined finality that regardless of past doubts, he would take it upon himself to make stronger, promising that the real challenge would begin tomorrow while fate would decide the rest. Bathed in a warm, golden glow, a young man offered a gentle smile as he reassured that even when life feels unbearably hard, enduring the struggle is still preferable to giving up entirely. Meanwhile, the dog's uneasy breaths grew louder as the shadowy orb drifted closer, its presence casting an unsettling tension throughout the tranquil room. On the TV, the streetwise cat darted past with a stolen fish clenched in her jaws, drawing the furious shouts of a man while a weary dog looked on, quietly comparing his own struggles to her relentless fight for survival. Watching the chaos fade as disappeared, the dog settled into quiet contemplation, deciding he might as well accept whatever special meal Immortal would bring after her shopping, then musing that treats like marinated ribs, daily walks, and thorough washes made his pampered existence feel not so different from the life of an emperor. In the gloom of a shattered battlefield, an exiled demon warrior stood among fallen enemies, his mind heavy with memories of the Immortal who destroyed his clan and banished him to another dimension, fueling his vengeful resolve as he confessed that, at first, every thought had turned toward waiting for a chance at revenge. Bathed in the gentle glow of purple energy and scattered starlight, the dog sprawled contentedly on its back, reflecting on how this tranquil existence far surpassed the relentless power struggles of the past. In a whirlwind of chaos, the smug MC taunted that kisses would only hurt the princess as the girl reached out, while the anxious dog frantically insisted that any immortal affection might be its end, and desperately tried to escape the explosive commotion. Moments later, as the gentle hush replaced the earlier chaos, the dog continued to study her intently, convincing himself that although a part of him missed her affectionate demands, he was ultimately grateful for the unexpected peace. Enjoying the warmth of her touch and the innocence in her eyes, he resolved to let her stay by his side, finding her timid presence unexpectedly charming. Then, as a man in a suit greeted him with a friendly promise to treat everyone to dinner, and mentioned his sister's marinated ribs, the atmosphere turned even more relaxed, inviting the MC to consider the suggestion about getting beef next time. Meanwhile, the dog's wagging tail became even more animated as the warmth between them deepened, and the sense of joyful reunion lingered in the air. Then, as the hallway echoed with soft footsteps and the dog's eager trot, the MC, still processing the scene, heard the man clarify that his obedience was simply fulfilling the earlier command, intensifying his disbelief at how convincingly dog-like he had become. In response to his master's urgent question, the dog's serious gaze lingered on the man's face, heightening the tension that now filled the once peaceful path. Then, as the adrenaline faded, he thought with quiet satisfaction that if not for his swift action, the baby immortal might have suffered a grave injury. Still holding his cup, the man's relaxed confidence lingered as he pressed further, prompting him to stammer that while he hadn't exactly sought a reward, the abruptness of the exchange left his dissatisfaction visible. As the hesitation faded, he thoughtfully touched his chin and announced his decision to grant the new name now, explaining that though it had been intended for, this moment felt right. Then, as anticipation gave way to disbelief, she exclaimed her amazement at the revelation, her eyes widening while the dog tensed with alert delight. In response, the resolute gesture of 3 raised fingers underscored his declaration, solidifying the act of renaming with an air of unwavering authority. Then the shock lingered on his face as confusion and unease took hold, and he admitted to himself that even for someone notorious, his behavior was altogether too much to accept. That happiness grew infectious as the dog, overwhelmed by the realization, wondered aloud if such recognition truly made him the Emperor's right hand. Then, as the dog's energetic barking filled the room, MC reflected inwardly on how the creature had lost its former mystique, while the standing man responded with a wry smile, suggesting that being liked by the dog was an honor in itself. Moments later, her thoughtful praise of the name left him sweating and bewildered, his confusion deepening as he silently wondered what appeal she could possibly find in such a name. The weight of those instructions hung in the air as the man stood frozen, determination slowly replacing his surprise, while the MC continued to pet the dog with calm authority. On the verge of his long-awaited training, a young man brims with excitement as he vows to dedicate himself completely to his master's teachings, only for the relaxed mentor, lounging on the couch, to reveal with a hint of humor that will actually be overseeing his special training. In a swirl of confusion and reassurance, the surprised man in the suit stared at the question marks surrounding him as someone calmly promised that if the unthinkable happened and he died, they would take responsibility and bring him back, leaving him to blurt out his disbelief and demand to know why death was even on the table. With the unsettling vision still lingering between them, the MC explained that sometimes such things occur and suggested the man would make a fine if revived, prompting a shocked protest as the idea of becoming a headless monster left the other man unnerved and desperate for a less ominous alternative. Then, as the woman's words hung heavy in the air, she insisted that his only option was to obey, explaining with cold certainty that their master always chose the unattractive for such grim revivals, while the man's disbelief left him speechless, and the doll-like figure continued to hover, amplifying the tension. As he crashed back into the darkness, shock and agony collided in his expression, the blood-red shadows swirling around him as the brutal impact left him gasping for breath. Then, as dread pooled in the silence, the foreboding possibility lingered. He might become bathed in the golden afternoon light. The young girl stretched her arms wide and, beaming with innocent delight, called out with exuberant excitement. In response to the girl's joyful greeting, the man gathered her gently onto his lap and with a warm smile told that had been waiting, while someone nearby teased that the immortal completely lost composure around the baby, their laughter blending with the quiet comfort of the scene as the dog dozed at their feet. As the girl's delighted gaze met his, the tender mood deepened as he marveled that this joyful child could really be his daughter, softly calling her his princess and asking what fun she had found today. Then, as the invitation lingered in the air, her outstretched hand and eager plea drew a flicker of warmth from the reserved father, who seemed quietly moved by her joyful insistence to share this playful moment together.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Web2 Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.